Chapter 940. Not many people saw how Suzimo attacked. In the blink of an eye, Yichi was defeated and killed. What a stunning sword strike. This person is really a vicious and merciless person. He killed such a beautiful woman without any hesitation. Most sword cultivators are decisive in killing. That's normal. However, when did such a powerful sword cultivator appear in 100 Refinement sect? Many cultivators discussed softly. Good sword. Perfected. Lord Panglong laughed. Jian Wuzong's eyes were bloodshot as he grit his teeth. If not for my startling dermic sword, how could he have killed his opponent with a single slash? Jian Wuzong was not the only one who thought that way. Most of the cultivators present thought that the reason why that sword strike possessed such shocking might was because of the connate perfected Lord dermic weapon, the startling dermic sword. Sword Sex Hang Chuyu focused his gaze and frowned in deep thought with a hint of confusion in his eyes. He could tell. Even without the startling dermic sword, Yichi would not have been able to escape death. Although that sword strike was extremely powerful, there was something strange about the sword technique. It did not seem like a sword technique and gave him a sense of déjà vu. However, Mo Ling attacked too quickly and the sword beam was fleeting. He did not have the chance to take a closer look. With the death of Yi Tianqing's maidservant, everyone realized that something big was about to happen. You have a death wish. Yi Tianqing stood up slowly and exuded a berserk might that caused the entire mystic courtyard to tremble. Woo! Before Yi Tianqing could do anything, Yi had already picked up her flute and started playing. The sound of the flute was filled with resentment and was pervasive, as though it could bore into everyone's consciousness and harm their essence spirits directly. Kill! Yi Tu and Yi San seemed to be unaffected by the sound of the flute. Instead, their auras surged and they charged towards Suzimo. Yi Si waved her sleeves and pink petals scattered down. Although the petals looked weak, they seemed to be able to slice the void into pieces when they drifted over. Yi Wu wielded her feather fan and injected dermic powers. 5 dermic patterns shone on the feather fan. It was a perfected Lord dermic weapon. Even Yi Tianqing's maidservants used perfect magical artifacts. What are you doing? Are you trying to bully me with numbers? On 100 Refinement sect's side, led by Dao Bing Yuding and Nangong Ling, the group of cultivators stood up and flashed their dermic weapons while conjuring hand seals. The cultivators of the Hunyuan sect also stepped forward. A great battle was about to break out. At this point, the situation was about to go out of control. Dao Lord Lan Yu frowned and had no choice but to step forward to stabilize the situation. If the situation was allowed to develop and the two sides fought, all the cultivators in the courtyard would be involved and no one would be spared. There was no need for this 1,000-crane tea party to continue. Chiguramon and her Arakatsuki Michinoku would become a joke. Enough! Arakatsuki Michinoku hollered and released a massive might that enveloped down. Not only did her voice contain the power of the Dharma Daojun, there was also a crane cry mixed in, destroying Yi's flute instantly. Yi Si's peach blossom froze in midair motionlessly. The dermic arts of many cultivators, be it Chaos Essence sect or 100 Refinement sect, dissipated instantly, be it those that were condensed or not. The methods of the Dharma Daojun, a sect master, were clear. This is the Chiguramon. Arakatsuki Michinoku said slowly. This is the 1,000-crane tea party. What are you guys trying to do? Do you have any respect for me, the sect master? Yi pointed at Suzimo and said coldly, this person ignored the rules of the Chiguramon and killed someone. He deserves to die. Bullsh * T. Little Fatty could not hold it in any longer and scolded. You little b *, you look so fair and clean, but your heart is too dirty. Can you guys be reasonable? Ru Xian sneered. That woman was clearly the one who attacked first. Are we not allowed to retaliate? Humph, she deserves to die. Let's put this matter aside for now. Arakatsuki Michinoku had a stern expression as he said in a deep voice, the feud between you guys can be resolved during the Paragon competition. I won't stop you then. The appearance of the Chiguramon Patriarch finally stabilized the situation. The cultivators of Chaos Essence sect and 100 Refinement sect retreated. Suddenly, Yi Tianqing laughed and looked at the 100 Refinement sect cultivators. Nodding slowly, he said, good, very good. 100 Refinement sect sure has guts to fight against Chaos Essence sect now. Fufu, ha ha. Don't worry, Brother Yi, Ming Han shouted. After the weapon refinement competition, 100 refinement sect will be removed from the 4 unorthodox groups. All right. Yi Tianqing glared at Su Zimo and said faintly, let's see how long more 100 refinement sect can protect you. Su Zimo smiled indifferently. Yi Tianqing was mistaken about something. The reason why Su Zimo dared to go against Yi Tianqing was not because of 100 refinement sect, but because of himself. Arakatsuki Michinoku looked at Lung Ro and said, go and participate in the talisman competition first. As for your marriage, pausing for a moment, Arakatsuki Michinoku glanced at Su Zimo and sneered, since someone overestimates himself and wants to challenge Yi Tianqing, we'll give him a chance during the Paragon competition. If Yi Tianqing wins, you have to listen to my arrangements. How about that? All right. Lung Ro agreed without hesitation. Even Arakatsuki Michinoku was stunned. Lung Ro's reply gave her a feeling that in her disciple's heart, Yi Tianqing would not win at all. How was that possible? Perfected Lord Lan Yu smiled and shook her head gently. In her eyes, the only thing Mo Ling could defeat Yi Tianqing in was his cultivation realm. However, for a monster incarnate like Yi Tianqing, the difference between early-stage and late-stage nascent souls was nothing. Yi Tianqing had even killed void reversions before. Or could it be that Mo Ling wanted to rely on that startling dermic sword? That was even more laughable. Arakatsuki Michinoku believed that Yi Tianqing also had Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapons and more than one. Lung Ro agreed readily and returned the 1,000 Crane Tea Party on track. For some reason, Arakatsuki Michinoku felt that Lung Ro seemed to have changed into a different person earlier on. Even though Lung Ro's expression was still indifferent, a trace of heart-stirring joy could be seen between her brows. Arakatsuki Michinoku shook her head and stopped thinking about it. No matter what, the situation before her was still firmly under her control. Just now, the interlude was merely an accident. The tea party continued. As a cultivator sent by the Chiguramon, Lung Ro was here to accept the challenges of various talisman masters from all over the Middle Continent. The talisman battle proceeded even faster. In less than an hour, the outcome was decided. Before the other talisman masters could refine their own talismans, Lung Ro had already refined a 9 Heavens Divine Thunder talisman. The power of that talisman was already at the peak of the nascent soul realm. In fact, even void reversions were wary of it. When the other talisman masters saw that, they gave up and admitted defeat. Naturally, Lung Ro was conferred the title of a talisman master and drank the supreme grade mystic tea. After the talisman battle was the weapon refinement battle. It was also the most important part of this 1,000 Crane Tea Party. Chapter 941. Ming Han had a confident expression and stood in the middle of the mystic courtyard long ago. He summoned his weapon tripod and it landed on the ground with a bang. Many cultivators focused their gazes and were shocked. The weapon tripod was about the height of a person. Its body was tough and shone with a dark golden metallic luster. 4 balls of netherworld flames were carved around the walls of the tripod, as though they could burn at any moment. Most importantly, there were 6 dermic patterns on the tripod. This was a Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon. This is the netherworld tripod, my destiny dermic weapon. Ming Han said proudly, back then, I made use of this tripod to successfully refine a Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon. Ah! This Ming Han is so powerful. If he can refine another Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon, won't 100 refinement sect definitely lose? The Master of Hellfire Hall is the top weapon refinement grandmaster in Tianhuang mainland right now. With this lad's inheritance, the rise of Hellfire Hall will be unstoppable. A wave of exclamations sounded from the crowd. This was the first time many of the cultivators present had heard of Ming Han and this matter. Sensing the gazes around him, Ming Han was delighted. He shifted his gaze and looked at Yu Hanyan of 100 Refinement sect with a provocative gaze. Yu Hanyan pursed her lips tightly with a nervous expression and the pressure increased. He's pressuring you. Don't fall for it. Su Zimo reminded softly. It's not that easy to refine a Khanate dermic weapon. Timing, geography, luck and environment are all intertwined to have a chance of success. Although Su Zimo had never refined a dermic weapon before, he had the foundation of weapon refinement to begin with and had Hake Dojin's guidance. He understood those theories. Taoist Yu Ding added. Junior Sister Lu, relax and do your best. Senior Sister Lu, you can definitely do it. Senior Sister Lu, defeat him. Many cultivators of 100 Refinement sect cheered for Yu Hanyan as well. Yu Hanyan took a deep breath and nodded. At this moment, Leng Ro, who had just been titled as a charm master, slowly walked over. She looked at Yu Hanyan and nodded slightly. Then she said, Fellow Taoist Lu, I wish you success. Although the two of them were both in the nascent soul realm, Fairy Leng Ro was much more famous than her. Moreover, the two of them did not know each other. Now, to be able to receive Leng Ro's encouragement, Yu Hanyan felt flattered, and her heart relaxed a lot. She smiled back and said, Thank you, Fairy Leng Ro. Leng Ro's expression remained indifferent as she nodded. When the people of 100 Refinement sect saw Fairy Leng Ro approaching, they could not help but feel nervous and uneasy. Most of the cultivators of 100 Refinement sect were rough men who spent their days tempering Dharma artifacts. Many cultivators blushed and did not even dare to look straight at her. Leng Ro glanced sideways at the green-robed man sitting beside her and smiled. Fellow Taoist Mo Ling, just now, thank you for your help. If it's convenient, please come over for a chat. Look, Fairy Leng Ro is smiling at that Mo Ling again. Fairy Leng Ro seems to be inviting that person. Aya, imagining the two of them standing together is truly a kill. Many cultivators groaned in their hearts. Many 100 Refinement sect disciples were dumbfounded, and their jaws almost dropped. All right. Su Zimo stood up and left with Leng Ro. Under the envious gazes of countless cultivators, Leng Ro brought Su Zimo, Little Fatty, Ji Chongtian and Shi Jian through the crowd and arrived beneath the mystic tea tree. Arikatsuki Michinoku frowned when she saw that. She was extremely unwilling to see Leng Ro get involved with Mo Ling of 100 Refinement sect. 100 Refinement sect was already in a precarious situation and might not even make it through this stage. As for Mo Ling, he was almost certain to die if he challenged Yi Tiancheng. Patriarch, let her be. A Chiguramon elder whispered. In any case, the paragons will be fighting soon. Mo Ling won't be able to avoid it. Yes, Arikatsuki Michinoku nodded and ignored Su Zimo and the others. Spirit consciousnesses can't enter under the mystic tea tree. There's no way we'll be exposed if we use spirit consciousnesses to send voice transmissions. Leng Ro's voice sounded in the minds of Su Zimo and the others. Bro, is that really you? Little Fatty could not hold it in any longer and asked. If not for the fact that there were too many cultivators nearby, he would have pounced over and given Su Zimo a bear hug. Su Zimo nodded with a smile and lamented, I'm back. Shi Jian did not say much and merely smiled foolishly at the side. He was extremely happy to reunite with an old friend as well. I've heard about what happened to you guys. Su Zimo said, initially, I thought that Dean would be able to attend this tea party. Unfortunately, he didn't. He managed to avoid a calamity. Pausing for a moment, Su Zimo looked at Little Fatty and said, Don't worry, after this tea party ends, I'll kill Dean personally and avenge you guys. Bro, don't be rash. Little Fatty said hurriedly, Dean has already cultivated to the void reversion realm. It won't be too late to look for him after your cultivation catches up to his. It's nothing for us to suffer this little grievance. Furthermore, this Yi Tiancheng is extremely strong and isn't inferior to Dean back then. Bro, don't underestimate him. Little Fatty was worried and reminded him again. Yes, Su Zimo nodded. Zimo, where have you been all these years? Why was there no news from you at all? Leng Ro looked at Su Zimo and asked curiously and concernedly. Su Zimo could not help but smile as he recalled the days when Monkey and the others ruled over the mountains in Thousand Demon Valley for the past 100 years. After leaving the ancient battlefield, I headed to Thousand Demon Valley. Su Zimo recounted his experiences in Thousand Demon Valley. They naturally had a lot to talk about after reuniting after a long time. Unknowingly, time passed. The weapon refinement competition in the center of the courtyard had already reached its climax. Including Ming Han, there were hundreds of weapon refinement masters from all over the Middle Continent that challenged Yu Hanyan. At that moment, apart from Ming Han and Yu Hanyan, the other weapon refinement masters had already withdrawn from the competition. That was because Ming Han and Yu Hanyan's weapon refinement speed far surpassed everyone else, and were already at the final step of condensing dermic patterns. Both of them were refining flying swords. Furthermore, Ming Han was a step ahead of Yu Hanyun. Condensing dermic patterns was similar to condensing spirit patterns. It was the most difficult, and all their previous efforts would be wasted if they were not careful. Right then, under countless gazes, a fifth beam of light shone from Ming Han's weapon tripod. This meant that Ming Han had already condensed 5 dermic patterns. That's way too scary. If Ming Han stops now, he would have successfully refined a perfect-grade perfected Lord dermic weapon. Many cultivators discussed. However, it was clear that Ming Han showed no signs of stopping. He was blessed with providence and was a rare weapon refinement genius throughout history. He wanted to defy the heavens and condense his 6th dermic pattern to refine a connate dermic weapon right in front of everyone. Once he succeeded in refining the connate dermic weapon, he would be invincible. What happened today would be recorded in the annals of weapon refinement forever. Chapter 942. The entire mystic courtyard fell into silence. Almost all the cultivators were watching the two people in the middle of the crowd, who were engaged in a weapon refinement battle. At that moment, both of them had reached the most critical moment. Ming Han was attempting to condense his 6th dermic pattern. As for Yu Hanyun, she was condensing her 5th dermic pattern. Neither of them gave up. No one knew the outcome of this weapon refinement battle until the final moment. After all, condensing 6 dermic patterns to create connate dermic weapons was heaven-defying, and the success rate was extremely low. If Ming Han failed, Yu Hanyun would naturally win. However, in the current situation, Ming Han still had the upper hand firmly. Since he was the first to condense 5 dermic patterns, the pressure on Yu Hanyun would definitely increase. Many disciples of 100 Refinement Sect looked nervous and clenched their fists, praying for Yu Hanyun secretly. Yu Hanyun's face was already pale. Weapon refinement was extremely mentally taxing. Furthermore, she was under such immense pressure. Ming Han closed his eyes and sensed the flying sword in the weapon tripod with his spirit consciousness. It rose and fell in a ball of hellfire, and the blade of the sword was burned red with 5 clear patterns. Ming Han's expression was no longer as relaxed as it was initially, and was grim. He did not have any confidence in condensing 6 dermic patterns either. He could only rely on his past experience, the perception that he had accumulated through years of weapon refinement, and his immense fortune to seize that fleeting opportunity. Whoosh! Right then, a bedazzling light burst forth from Yu Hanyun's weapon tripod. The cultivators turned and gasped. The 5th dermic pattern. Yu Hanyun had also condensed her 5th dermic pattern. If she stopped now, she would have successfully created a perfected Lord dermic weapon. For weapon refinement masters, being able to create perfect dermic weapons was already their limit. Under normal circumstances, Yu Hanyun would be able to defeat Qi refinement warriors from all over the Middle Continent with just this perfected Lord dermic weapon. However, she could not defeat Ming Han. Ming Han's weapon refinement speed was even faster than hers. Furthermore, Ming Han was currently condensing his 6th dermic pattern. Yu Hanyun took a deep breath and tried her best to control the flames. She calmed herself down and was in no hurry to condense the 6th dermic pattern. She was waiting. If Ming Han failed and she stopped in time, she would be able to win this weapon refinement battle with that perfected Lord dermic weapon. Ming Han's eyes were still closed as if he was immersed in his own world. Yu Hanyun's actions did not affect him at all. The crowd held their breaths, not daring to blink. This weapon refining competition had already reached the most critical moment, and the outcome could be decided at any time. After an unknown period of time, Ming Han suddenly opened his eyes and shouted, "Condense!" In an instant, the power of heaven and earth in the void seemed to be boiling. An endless stream of heaven and earth power surged into the netherworld cauldron, almost condensing to form a huge vortex. Within the netherworld cauldron, dermic power surged and multicolored light burst forth. The 6th dermic pattern appeared on the sword. The connate perfected Lord dermic artifact was complete. The expressions of the cultivators changed. Everyone stared at the scene in front of them in disbelief. It was way too shocking. A flying sword that was burned scarlet slowly appeared from the netherworld cauldron. 6 patterns could be clearly seen on the sword, and it shone with a bedazzling light. This was a scene that most cultivators would not be able to witness in their entire lives. Nobody wanted to miss it. Good. Even the Chiguramon patriarch Arakatsuki Michinoku could not help but praise. Everyone from 100 Refinement sect was shocked, and their expressions turned much darker. Yu Hanyan's heart skipped a beat, and she could not control the flames. The flying sword in the cauldron almost exploded, and her efforts were for naught. She took a deep breath and hurriedly stabilized the flames. The appearance of this Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon meant that she had no way out. She could only face the difficulty and continue to condense the 6th Dermic pattern. The situation changed instantly. In an instant it was as if all the pressure was pressing down on this weak woman. She even felt like she could not breathe. Ming Han stood proudly and received the admiring gazes from all around. Countless people praised him as he looked down at Yu Hanyan from above. That gaze was filled with indescribable contempt and disdain. Yu Hanyan did not dare to meet Ming Han's gaze. She could only try her best to compose herself and attempt to condense the 6th Dermic pattern. Time passed bit by bit. Yu Hanyan's face turned paler and a thin layer of sweat covered her forehead. She did not dare to try condensing it. If she failed, she would fall into an endless abyss. However, if she did not attempt to condense it, her chances would decrease until she was exhausted mentally and physically. The external pressure and mental fatigue caused Yu Hanyan to be on the verge of breaking down. When he saw that, Ming Han smirked. He knew that he was bound to win. Under the mystic tea tree, Su Zimo and the others were watching the situation as well. I'm afraid this pretty sister is going to lose. Little Fatty sighed. Lung Ro turned to Su Zimo and asked, if she loses, it will affect 100 Refinement sect's reputation greatly. I'm afraid. The first segment of the 1,000 Crane Tea Party was to select the great masters of the 4 unorthodox groups. The titles of Great Formation, Great Elixir Refinement and Great Talisman Amulet were all obtained by cultivators of Ancient Array Sect, Elixir Yang Sect and Chiguramon. If 100 Refinement Sect cultivators did not obtain the title of Great Weapon Refinement Master, Hellfire Hall would definitely take advantage of the situation to make things difficult for them. Su Zimo frowned and fell into deep thought. There was a high chance that he would be chased out of this place by Arakatsuki Michinoku if he used his strength before the Paragons fought. However, he would not be of much help if he did not use his strength. Su Zimo rubbed his forehead gently and pondered for a moment. His heart skipped a beat and his gaze flickered. Condense. Right then, Yu Hanyan finally made her move and condensed her 6th Dermic pattern. However, the moment she said that, a faint cracking sound came from the weapon tripod. Although the sound was soft, it was like a bolt from the blue in Yu Hanyan's ears. The smile on Ming Han's face deepened. He had already won. That sound was the sound of a sword shattering due to a failure in condensing the Dermic pattern. Immediately after, a loud bang sounded from the weapon tripod, and the sword exploded into countless shards that struck the walls of the tripod. Yu Hanyan's mind was implicated and her body swayed as she fell from midair. Her face was pale as she spat out a mouthful of blood. Hanyan. Nangong Ling hurried forward and supported Yu Hanyan with heartache in her eyes. I've lost. Yu Hanyan murmured with a miserable expression and eyes filled with pain. Ming Han's eyes were cold as he shouted, 100 Refinement sect can't even protect the title of Weapon Refinement Master. What right do you have to be one of the 4 unorthodox groups? That's right. Perfected Lord Panglan of Heavenly Dipper sect stood up and declared, it's a fact that 100 Refinement sect has declined. In my opinion, you should have been removed from the 4 unorthodox groups a long time ago. Jian Wuzong said coldly, I agree. The reason why he stood out was purely because Su Zimo had vented his anger on 100 Refinement sect. Yi Tianqing said indifferently, how dare 100 Refinement sect stay here? Get the hell out of here. What a disgrace. Yi Tianqing's thoughts were simple. If he chased everyone from 100 Refinement sect out of the Chiguramon, he could send the 9 WRMS beside him to kill everyone from 100 Refinement sect. Of the 6 major immortal sects that participated in the Tea Party, 3 of them expressed their stance and stood on Hellfire Hall's side. The other 3 immortal sects were silent and watched coldly from the sidelines. It was clear that they had no intention of helping. The 100 Refinement sect cultivators were at a loss. Instantly, it was as though 100 Refinement sect had become the target of everyone and everyone wanted to step on them. Chapter 943. Heavenly Dipper Sect, Chaos Essence Sect and Sword Sect expressed their stance one after another. The other three immortal sects watched coldly from the sidelines. The Void Reversion monks of the three major Buddhist monasteries, Hollow Monastery, Formless Monastery and Wisdom Monastery, who came to attend the tea party lowered their heads. It was clear that they did not want to get involved in this matter. Most of the time, the Buddhist monasteries stood aloof from worldly affairs and rarely participated in fights between sections. If they can't even obtain the title of Weapon Refinement Master, 100 Refinement Sect will indeed live up to its reputation as one of the four unorthodox groups. Actually, there's nothing wrong with letting Hellfire Hall replace 100 Refinement Sect. In the cultivation world, strength is respected. That's normal. Many cultivators discussed softly. Dao Bing Yuding stood up slowly with a dark expression as he shouted, "You want to snatch the position of 100 Refinement Sect with just a weapon refinement competition? What a joke. Everyone has the qualifications except for Hellfire Hall. A traitor of our 100 Refinement Sect wants to dominate? Ridiculous. Ha ha ha." Ming Han reared his head in laughter. "I think you're the one who's truly laughable. 100 Refinement Sect is rotten and old. It doesn't want to improve and only exists in name. Master could not bear to see the decline of the Tao of weapon refinement, so he established his own sect. In a few thousand years he has already achieved so much. Who dares to say that he's not qualified? As the saying goes, there's no seniority in learning the Tao. Those who are accomplished are the masters. Among the 5 heretical doctrines, the cult master of corpse refinement cult was once a disciple of puppet sect. Now, hasn't this senior created an unprecedented achievement that is on par with puppet sect? Master is extremely talented and created the Tao of weapon refinement with Hellfire. His current achievements have long surpassed everyone in 100 Refinement Sect. Who dares to say that he's not qualified? Ming Han had an arrogant expression and his sleeves fluttered in high spirits. His words were sonorous and powerful, causing many surrounding cultivators to nod their heads secretly. Ming Han had just won the weapon refinement competition. He was young and his sharpness was at its peak. At that moment his words were domineering. Although Dao Bing Yuding's cultivation realm was high, it paled in comparison. Even everyone from 100 Refinement Sect had doubts in their hearts. Could it be that the sect had really reached a point of no return? Nangong Ling hugged Yu Hanyan and glared at the dazzling Ming Han. Her eyes were filled with grief and indignation. Taoist Yuding looked in the direction of the 3 unorthodox groups. No matter what, since ancient times, the 4 unorthodox groups had been united. If 100 Refinement Sect was in trouble, the other 3 unorthodox groups would not sit idly by. Arikatsuki Michinoku glanced at the faces of the people from the Hunyuan sect, the Heavenly Dipper sect, and the Sword sect. He sighed in his heart and did not say anything. Hellfire Hall was clearly prepared for today's matter. With the support of the 3 immortal sects, even if Chiguramon stood out, it would be useless. He would even offend the 3 immortal sects, and the losses would outweigh the gains. Tang Yu of Elixir Yang sect could not stand it any longer and raised her voice. "Fellow Taoist Ming Han, you're wrong. 100 Refinement Sect has been around for ages and has a strong foundation. How can it be as bad as you say? Furthermore, the position of the 4 unorthodox groups is no small matter. How can you make such a conclusion based on the victory of the 2 weapon refinement masters?" Fufu. Ming Han chuckled again and raised his voice. "Among grandmasters, 100 Refinement Sect is even less of a match. Now that all the major sects are here, let me ask 100 Refinement Sect a question. If my master were to appear, who would be able to win against 100 Refinement Sect in weapon refinement?" The 100 Refinement Sect cultivators were silent. Dao Bing Yuding did not say anything either. Prior to this, the weapon refinement grandmasters of 100 Refinement Sect had fought against the Hall Master of Hellfire Hall and suffered a crushing defeat. The reason why 100 Refinement Sect valued the weapon refinement fight at the Thousand Crane Tea Party so much was because they wanted to make use of this opportunity to win back. To think that it would still end in a crushing defeat. Although Ming Han was Jining Jinjuan at that moment, He had already accumulated his might and was bedazzling. He pointed in the direction of 100 Refinement Sect and hollered. You guys are no match for the battle between masters. You guys don't dare to accept the battle between grandmasters. What right does 100 Refinement Sect have to become one of the unorthodox groups? His voice was like thunder that rumbled in the ears of the 100 Refinement Sect cultivators. 100 Refinement Sect is finished. That's right. Even if 100 Refinement Sect is unwilling to admit it, I'm afraid there won't be a place for 100 Refinement Sect among the unorthodox groups after today. To think that such a super sect with an ancient legacy would fall just like that. Many cultivators discussed without any reservations, and no longer considered the feelings of the people of 100 Refinement Sect. Yi Tiancheng sneered with mockery in his eyes. If I were a disciple of 100 Refinement Sect, I would have scrammed back to the sect long ago. How can I still have the cheek to stay here? Finally, 100 Refinement Sect cultivator could not withstand the pressure and stood up silently. Before long, a second 100 Refinement Sect disciple stood up and left with his head lowered. When Dao Bing Yuding saw this, he extended his arm and moved his lips, as though he wanted to persuade them to stay. However, he did not say anything. Yi Tiancheng's gaze was cold as he released a fluctuation with his spirit consciousness. He was already prepared to let the Dubuarm beneath his feet head outside the Chigurumon to kill everyone from 100 Refinement Sect. Are you guys not leaving because you want to challenge me? Ming Han looked at Dao Bing Yuding, Nangong Ling and the others with mockery in his eyes as he smiled. Oh, I almost forgot. Your 100 Refinement Sect has an ancient legacy and has a strong foundation. You might have hidden dragons and crouching tigers. Anyone who is indignant can come up and challenge me. If any of you can refine a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon, it'll be my loss. How about that? The cultivators of Hellfire Hall burst into laughter. I want to try, just as Dao Bing Yuding could not take it anymore, and was about to leave with the group of cultivators with an ugly expression. A voice sounded from the crowd. The cultivators were stunned and turned to look. A green-robed man separated the crowd with an indifferent expression and walked in. It was Su Zimo. It's you. Ming Han's gaze turned cold. Yi Tiancheng looked at Su Zimo with undisguised killing intent. This person had spoiled his plans time and time again. To think that he would appear again now. He could not wait to attack and kill this person here. Little Granduncle Master, you. Nangong Ling and the other two looked at Su Zimo with sparkling eyes. Could Little Granduncle Master be not only a sword cultivator with shocking combat strength, but also an outstanding weapon refinement master? Could Little Granduncle Master truly be able to save 100 Refinement Sect this time round? The three of them had never seen Su Zimo refine weapons before. Therefore, when Su Zimo stood out, endless anticipation surged in their hearts. Dao Bing Yuding's heart skipped a beat as well and his eyes lit up. At that moment, he suddenly understood why the Patriarch and Dao Lord Scarlet Star reminded him to listen to Little Granduncle Master's orders at critical moments before they parted. So, Little Granduncle Master was the hidden trump card of 100 Refinement Sect. Nangong Ling and the other two and Dao Bing Yuding looked at Su Zimo expectantly. Unexpectedly, as though he had thought of something, Su Zimo suddenly turned around and looked at Nangong Ling and the other two. He coughed gently and asked, "Do any of you have a weapon tripod? Can I borrow it?" Nangong Ling, Ru Xian. Dao Bing Yuding nearly spat out a mouthful of blood. The surrounding crowd was stunned for a moment before bursting into laughter. True weapon refinement masters treated weapon tripods as their most important dermic weapons and carried them with them. How could they not have one? Su Zimo could not be blamed for that. He had a crafting cauldron for refining spirit artifacts, but he didn't have one for refining Dharma artifacts. As for the bronze square tripod, it had already been refined into a destiny dermic weapon by his scarlet-haired Een spirit, and was surrounded by demonic chi, making it inconvenient for it to be revealed. Chapter 944. Did this Mo Ling jump out just to embarrass himself? He doesn't even have a weapon tripod and he wants to fight against Ming Han? Don't say that. Perhaps he's truly a hidden expert and has long cultivated to the point where he has no tripod in his body but a tripod in his heart. Ha 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 ha. The cultivators burst into laughter. Their words filled with mockery. Ru Xian rolled her eyes and sighed internally. Little granduncle master, why are you still causing trouble at a time like this? Sigh. Su Zimo was not annoyed when he heard the laughter around him and had a calm expression. To be fair, he did not have much confidence in standing out this time round. Furthermore, in terms of true dermic weapon refinement standards, any one of 100 refinement sect's disciples would be able to surpass him, let alone Ming Han and Yu Hanyan. Unlike others, Yu Hanyan did not laugh. From the first time she saw Su Zimo, she had a feeling that this person was shrouded in a mysterious aura with many secrets. She lay in Nangong Ling's embrace and whispered, "Senior brother, lend your weapon tripod to granduncle master." Under normal circumstances, her weapon tripod was of the best grade. However, just now, her flying sword exploded and her weapon tripod was damaged as well. She had to return to repair it before she could refine weapons. Nangong Ling was stunned and said instinctively, "My weapon tripod isn't of a high grade. It's only a superior grade perfected Lord dermic weapon." Weapon tripods were naturally key to creating connate dermic weapons. The reason why Ming Han was able to succeed had a lot to do with his netherworld tripod. Unexpectedly, Su Zimo waved it off. "It's fine, just lend me yours." Fufu. When he heard that, Ming Han was completely relieved. When Su Zimo stood out earlier on, he was truly unsure of the situation. He had interacted with Su Zimo previously, and did not know how strong the latter was or what methods he had. However, when he saw that Su Zimo wanted to use a superior grade weapon tripod, he knew that this person would definitely lose. "You don't even know the most basic knowledge of weapon refinement, and you want to fight with me?" Ming Han shook his head and sneered. Nangong Ling saw that Su Zimo's expression was serious and did not seem to be joking. She could only brace herself and pass her weapon refining cauldron over. Su Zimo took it, knocked it a few times and looked it up and down. Arikatsuki Michinoku furrowed his brows and asked, "Are you serious, Mo Ling? This is an artifact refining competition. If you want to cause trouble, don't blame me for driving you out." "Of course I'm serious." Su Zimo nodded and said, "Senior, please set up a divine sense barrier." The refining process would be carried out in the weapon refining cauldron. Many of the spirit gathering techniques were extremely secretive. In order to prevent others from using their soul consciousness to investigate, they would set up barriers outside. Arikatsuki Michinoku snorted coldly. His glabella flickered as he set up a barrier. This kind of barrier could isolate divine sense, but it couldn't block sight. This was normal. If one's vision was blocked, there would be no point in watching the weapon refinement process. "Senior brother Nangong, I still have a small piece of Yuan meteor stone left. Hand it to granduncle master." Yu Hanyan took out a small stone from her storage bag and handed it over. The first step of weapon refinement was to choose materials. If one wanted to refine connate dermic weapons, materials were of utmost importance. Su Zimo waved it off. "There's no need. I've prepared a material myself." With that said, he flipped his palm. Everyone focused their gazes and saw a milky white pebble lying quietly in Su Zimo's palm. "What material is that?" "I don't know. I've never seen it before." "What can you refine with such a small material?" "After tempering it and removing the impurities, you should be able to refine an embroidery needle, right?" Everyone from Hellfire Hall burst into laughter. Ming Han frowned. He did not recognize the material either. However, he did not mind. What kind of heaven-defying material was it? Even Jining Jinjuan's flames could not melt it. In reality, even the 3 Dharma characteristic Tao Lords present did not recognize what the cobblestone was, let alone Ming Han and the others. Su Zimo looked at the expressions of the crowd in silence. Even among the cultivators of Tianhuang mainland, there were very few who could recognize the origin of the stone, let alone the people in the mystic courtyard. That stone was the illumination stone that was originally hidden in Su Zimo's right eye. The illumination stone was obtained by the Hakya Dojin in a primordial ruin. However, he did not know the origin of the stone either. As for the red-headed ghost at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, he only mentioned a few possibilities without being certain. No matter what, the illumination stone was extremely strong. The secret skill of the dragon's illumination dragon, I was comprehended through the illumination stone. The illumination sword formation was also comprehended through the illumination stone. The stone had been hidden in Suzimo's right eye the entire time and did not show any signs of activity for the past few years. However, perhaps because he cultivated the illumination dragon eye, he felt a certain connection with the illumination stone a month ago. It was as though the illumination stone had become a part of his body and could change according to his will. Of course, that did not have much of an impact on Suzimo, nor would it bring about any changes. It was only earlier on when he was beneath the mystic tea tree that he thought of a possibility. Perhaps he could split the illumination stone into several equal parts and condense them into the form of flying swords. That way, he would be able to assemble a set of flying swords easily. Although those flying swords were not dermic weapons, they contained the core of the illumination stone. However, its core was the illumination stone that contained countless mysteries. It was indestructible and definitely not weaker than a dermic weapon in terms of strength. There were many mystical treasures and extraordinary items in the world. Even without dermic patterns, they were incomparably powerful and unshakable. For example, the 7 unique treasures. For example, Monkey's Imminent. For example, Qinglian's creation. For example, Soraka flower. The illumination stone was one of them as well. Suzimo's plan was simple. He wanted to make use of the illumination stone and the secrecy of the weapon refinement process to deceive everyone in front of everyone. The reason why he did not appear just now, despite the aggressiveness of many sects, was because he was contemplating the feasibility of this plan beneath the tea tree. He only stood out after he deduced the entire process. Of course, there were many uncertainties to this plan. Even Suzimo himself was not confident of success. Trying his best to compose himself, Suzimo's figure rose slowly. Waving his sleeves, he swept up the weapon tripod on the ground and hovered it before him. Thereafter, he placed the illumination stone into the weapon tripod. Swoosh! Suzimo conjured hand seals and a scarlet flame appeared in his palm. It was the immortal Tao fire. He placed it beneath the weapon tripod and began to refine it continuously. These steps looked like they were real. In reality, Suzimo was merely putting on an act. An hour passed and the immortal Tao fire was almost burning through the weapon tripod. However, there was still no movement from the illumination stone within. When he saw that, Suzimo was relieved. At the very least, it proved that the illumination stone was indeed indestructible. Normally speaking, after material selection and smelting, it would be molding. If he wanted to deceive everyone present, the molding step was the true key. Chapter 945. Minghan scoffed coldly. Although there were no major mistakes in Suzimo's weapon refinement steps and movements, he was extremely inexperienced in the eyes of a weapon refinement master like him. Minghan stood at the side with his arms crossed, not in a hurry at all as he waited to see Suzimo make a fool of himself. According to his estimations, Suzimo would only be able to condense 3 dermic patterns at most. If he was not lucky enough, he might not even be able to condense a single one. Suzimo continued his weapon refinement as though no one was around. Normally speaking, at the step of forming, the spirit materials inside should have melted into a liquid state and burned red like lava. However, the illumination stone in Suzimo's weapon tripod was still the same. However, under the control of Suzimo's spirit consciousness, the illumination stone gradually separated into 36 stones the size of water droplets. In his mind, one of the water droplets gradually changed and condensed into an extremely small and delicate flying sword. Thereafter, Suzimo's lips curled and a smile appeared in his eyes. With a thought, a pattern appeared on the body of the flying sword. It looked like a dermic pattern that had been condensed. With another thought, another pattern appeared on the body of the sword. The pattern was not condensed on the sword with dermic powers. It was engraved on the body of the sword. It was a fake dermic pattern, but it looked no different from the real thing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the blink of an eye, there were already 6 patterns on the body of the sword. If Suzimo wanted to, even 7 or 8 patterns would be a piece of cake, let alone 6. Of course, if he were to create 7 or 8 patterns, he would be exposed right away. Under normal circumstances, unless it was an extremely complicated shape, the process of forming would take a relatively short amount of time. However, Suzimo was different. The process of forming took an extremely long time. Not only did he have to form a total of 36 flying swords, the size, shape and position of the 36 flying swords could not be deviated at all. That was an extremely exhausting task. It takes so long to shape a flying sword. It seems that this person really doesn't have much ability. Hee. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of stunning performance he will have during the tempering and spirit gathering steps. The gazes of many cultivators could not penetrate the weapon tripod and their spirit consciousnesses were isolated. They naturally did not know what was happening within. If anyone could see the situation inside the weapon refining cauldron, their eyeballs would fall out of their sockets. After a long time, Suzimo finally finished shaping. The most interesting parts of the entire refining process were the tempering and spirit gathering steps. The shaping process took almost 2 hours, and many cultivators were already impatient. Next was tempering. The 100 Refinement sect had a special tempering technique, the 1,000 Hammer Finger. Back then, Hake Dojin had only taught him some superficial knowledge. It was only 3 months ago that he had taught him the 1,000 Hammering Finger. This was Suzimo's first time practicing this secret technique. The tempering process was naturally extremely awkward. Everyone from 100 Refinement sect either lowered their heads or looked sideways. They were too embarrassed to look. His tempering technique was way too crude. Suzimo did not mind at all and pretended to temper for a long time before beginning spirit gathering. Many cultivators perked up and waited to watch the show. It was easy for all sorts of problems to occur during the spirit gathering stage. If spirit gathering failed and their weapons exploded, some weapon refinement masters would be mentally exhausted. Coupled with such an unforeseen event, many of them would faint on the spot due to anxiety. There were many who were severely injured. Just now, Yu Hanyan was in such a state. Ruxian prayed silently. It's inevitable that the flying sword will explode. I only hope that the heavens will protect little granduncle master and ensure that he's fine. Whoosh! Before long, a beam of light shone from the weapon tripod. Everyone was stunned. A dermic pattern was condensed? Ming Han's expression was normal. It was normal for a dermic pattern to be condensed and there was nothing to be surprised about. Not long after, a second beam of light flashed. This meant that 2 dermic patterns had been condensed. Outsiders could not see what was going on inside the weapon tripod. In reality, it was silent inside the weapon tripod. Suzimo was not condensing dermic patterns at all. Given his nascent soul realm cultivation, it was extremely easy for him to play some tricks in the weapon tripod and create some light. Arikatsuki Michinoku frowned slightly. She felt that something was amiss. However, although she was the master of a sect, she could not use her spirit consciousness to check out the situation inside while others were refining weapons. That would be taboo for weapon refinement masters. In reality, if there was a weapon refinement grandmaster present who was experienced and sharp, Suzimo's methods would naturally not be able to escape their eyes. Unfortunately, there were no weapon refinement grandmasters at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party. Whoosh! Before long, a third beam of light flashed. This time round, even Ming Han exclaimed softly. Of course, he was not nervous. The further one progressed in spirit gathering, the more difficult it was and the lower the chances of success. At the very least, half of the weapon refinement masters present would be able to condense 3 dermic patterns. Just as he was pondering, a fourth beam of light flashed. For dermic patterns. This time round, even the crowd was restless. Many cultivators no longer looked down on him. No matter what, a supreme-grade dermic weapon with 4 dermic patterns was already considered a rather brilliant weapon refinement master. After a while, a fifth beam of light burst forth. This time round, the crowd was in an uproar. Even everyone from 100 Refinement sect widened their eyes in disbelief. Nangong Ling and the other 2 were dumbfounded. In their eyes, their little granduncle master, who did not even have a weapon tripod with his crude weapon refinement techniques, managed to refine a perfected Lord Dermic weapon with a tattered weapon tripod? Ming Han frowned. He could also sense that something was amiss, but he could not pinpoint what it was. Furthermore, he could already feel the pressure. Mo Ling can't have truly created a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon, right? Ming Han narrowed his eyes and looked at Suzimo, pondering. After an unknown period of time, whoosh! A bedazzling light burst forth from the weapon tripod once more as dermic power surged and filled the void. Ah! A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. The sixth dermic pattern lit up and the crowd was shocked. That's impossible. Ming Han's expression was dark as he grit his teeth. How can 6 dermic patterns be that easy? I don't believe it. Ming Han was not the only one who did not believe it. Most of the cultivators present, including everyone from 100 Refinement Sect, could not believe it and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Su Zimo did not give the cultivators too much time to react and poured the cold water he prepared into the weapon tripod. Shing! Green smoke billowed. The quenching was complete. In reality, the quenching was to place a red-hot flying sword in cold water. However, the illumination stone was burned by the immortal Dao fire and did not move at all. If he took out his flying sword directly, it would be exposed instantly. The weapon tripod was boiling hot, and there would definitely be sizzling sounds when cold water was poured into it. When they saw that, a thought flashed through the minds of the cultivators. This person's quenching technique was indeed different, and they did not think too much about it. It was a success. It was finally time for them to see the truth. Looking at the flustered Ming Han not far away, Su Zimo smiled gently. If no one discovered any flaws by now, Ming Han would be the next one to suffer a tragedy. Chapter 946. Where's your flying sword? Take it out and let us all take a look. Ming Han widened his eyes and shouted. Don't be anxious. Su Zimo's expression was calm. After a moment of hesitation, he controlled one of the flying swords and rose slowly from the weapon tripod. If no one could tell that there was a problem with this flying sword, everything would be fine. If anyone could tell that there was a problem, even if he brought out all 36 flying swords, it would only be a joke. Right in front of everyone, a small and exquisite flying sword appeared. It was milky white and looked like a slender silver needle. What's that? How can that be called a flying sword? Ha 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 ha, that's clearly an embroidery needle. Did Mo Ling refine an embroidery needle for needlework? The Hellfire Hall cultivators mocked. However, most of the cultivators did not laugh. That was because most of the people present were nascent soul paragons. As long as they focused their gazes, they could tell that although the dermic weapon was small and exquisite, it was indeed in the form of a flying sword. Moreover, 6 veins could be vaguely seen on the sword. Although the dermic weapon was small, it was indeed a connate dermic weapon with 6 dermic patterns. What should we do now? Both of them have refined connate dermic weapons and the title of Weapon Refinement Master can be given to both of them. However, there's no victor between the two of them and the 2 sections. Furthermore, Mo Ling seems to have refined the weapon for a shorter period of time than Ming Han. Many cultivators discussed. Everyone from 100 Refinement Sect was excited. They had not expected that the situation would develop to this stage, and there would be a turn for the better. Ming Han frowned. He felt that something was amiss but he could not figure out what it was. When he heard the discussions around him, he felt frustrated and his mind was even more chaotic. He could not understand. Even connate dermic weapons have differences in strength. Ming Han sneered. How can that embroidery needle of yours be compared to my flying sword? You'll know after we compete. Su Zimo smiled indifferently and controlled the small and exquisite flying sword to stab towards Ming Han. In the void, a cold light flashed and the flying sword was already close. Ming Han was shocked. Without much time to think, he subconsciously took out the flying sword that he had just refined and slashed at the incoming flying sword. Clang! Ming Han shuddered. His flying sword was actually repelled by this tiny flying sword, and the light on the sword also dimmed significantly. The crowd was moved. If the flying sword was repelled, it was because Ming Han's dermic powers were no match for Su Zimo. The weakening of the light on the sword meant that Ming Han's flying sword was indeed inferior to the small flying sword that Su Zimo had refined. Su Zimo's flying sword hovered in midair, emitting a milky white glow all over its body. As though it could absorb the energy emitted by the blazing sun, it became even more brilliant. The essence of the flying sword was the illumination stone. Even connate dermic weapons would not be able to shake it. Su Zimo cultivated the illumination eye every day with the help of the scorching sun. The scorching sun and the illumination stone had a mysterious connection to begin with. so it was not strange for such a scene to occur. However, in the eyes of many cultivators, it was extremely shocking. Although this flying sword is small, it's truly an eye-opener for it to be able to trigger the radiance of the scorching sun. Seems like Hellfire Hall has lost this weapon refinement battle. The expressions of the cultivators of Heavenly Dipper sect, Chaos Essence sect and Sword sect darkened gradually. This person refined a total of 36 flying swords and all of them are Khanate dermic weapons? It's not only 36 Khanate dermic weapons, they're all identical. He refined an entire set of flying swords. That's way too terrifying. Heavens! How can such methods be done by humans? It was already shocking enough that a Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon was refined. But now Su Zimo threw out a huge pile of them. The visual and mental impact was indescribable. The crowd was dumbfounded and their jaws were about to drop to the ground. What's the background of this person? It's already a blessing from the heavens for others to painstakingly refine a Khanate dermic weapon. Yet this guy is mass-producing it? What's there to compete for? Ming Han is way too weak. As though he was struck by lightning, Ming Han fell to the ground limply with widened eyes. His mind was blank as he shook his head repeatedly. Impossible, impossible. The consecutive blows had already left him in a daze. Chapter 947. When Su Zimo saw that the situation was settled, he waved his hand gently and put away the 36 flying swords. No matter what, his flying swords were not Khanate dermic weapons after all. If they were exposed for too long, there was no guarantee that nothing would happen. Even if the 36 flying swords were gathered together, they were not that big. Su Zimo held them in his palm and wiped his glabella carelessly. The 36 flying swords had already entered his right eye silently. Even if 100 Refinement sect wins this weapon refinement battle, it doesn't mean anything. The person who spoke was seated at the front of Hellfire Hall. He was the only void reversion from Hellfire Hall for this trip, and his Dao title was Refinement Peak. Everyone knew that Hellfire Hall's words meant that they had admitted defeat. Dao being Refinement Peak's expression darkened as he said slowly, "No one from 100 Refinement sect can defeat our Hall Master in the Weapon Refinement Grandmaster competition." Not necessarily, Su Zimo said indifferently. If Hellfire Hall is indignant, 100 Refinement sect will naturally look for you after the tea party. I'm just afraid that Hellfire Hall won't dare to accept the challenge. Everyone from 100 Refinement sect felt guilty. They knew very well that no one in the sect could surpass the Hellfire Hall's Hall Master in terms of weapon refinement. The reason why Su Zimo dared to say such words was naturally because of Hakuya Dojin. After the tea party, Hakuya Dojin would reconstruct his body and return domineeringly. Given his accomplishments in weapon refinement, he would definitely not lose to the Hellfire Hall's Hall Master. Alright, let's wait and see. Dao being Refinement Peak sneered. Su Zimo returned the weapon tripod to Nangong Ling before turning around and looking at Arakatsuki Michinoku, who was not far away. "Senior, the outcome of this weapon refinement battle should be clear. Please bestow the tea, Senior." Arakatsuki Michinoku was extremely unwilling. However, at that moment she naturally could not break the rules set by Chiguramon in front of everyone. Taking a deep breath, Arakatsuki Michinoku calmed his mind and slowly said, "D." Very quickly, a steaming cup of top-grade mystic tea was handed to Su Zimo. On the other hand, the Dharma characteristic elder of Thousand Crane sect was friendly towards Su Zimo and nodded with a smile. "This tea should be drunk while it's hot. Drink it in one go and use your essence spirit to comprehend the mysteries within." "Thank you, Senior." Su Zimo received the supreme grade mystic tea but did not drink it. Instead, he returned to the front of 100 Refinement sect's formation with a teacup. "Drink up." Under the suffocating gazes of countless people, Su Zimo actually handed the top-grade mystic tea to Yu Han-yun. The crowd was moved. One had to know that the true focus of the Thousand Crane Tea Party was the mystic tea. The nascent soul realm prodigies of the middle ground gathered here just to drink a cup of mystic tea. Even the ordinary mystic tea was a great opportunity and supreme glory. Furthermore, there were only 5 cups of supreme-grade mystic tea. To be precise, there were only 2 cups left of the tea party. including the one in Su Zimo's hands. But now, he had actually given away the supreme-grade mystic tea. Isn't Mo Ling way too extravagant? The moment he attacked, he gave away a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon. Now he's even giving away supreme-grade mystic tea. No way, I've already fallen for him. A Chiguramon female cultivator whispered with an infatuated expression. Another female cultivator murmured as well. This is truly unbearable. If it was me, I would have fainted from happiness long ago when that supreme-grade mystic tea was handed over. Everyone from 100 Refinement sect widened their eyes in shock as well. Many people looked at Su Zimo and Yu Hanyan with strange expressions. Chapter 948. Looking at Su Zimo's back view, Nangong Ling and the other two exchanged glances with complicated expressions. For some reason, the three of them felt that there seemed to be another meaning behind Su Zimo's words just now. The three of them were right. Su Zimo's words were to draw a clear line between him and 100 Refinement sect. If he were to fight with the Paragons, there was a high chance that he would not be able to hide his identity. He did not want to cause too much trouble for 100 Refinement sect. How arrogant! Let's see what happens to you. Who do you think you are? There's only 1 cup of supreme-grade mystic tea and you think you can have it just because you want it? Fufu, only the number 1 perfected lord of the Middle Continent is qualified to have supreme-grade mystic tea. You're not worthy. There was no need for Yi Tianqing to say anything. Many nascent soul paragons present could not hold it in and stood out to mock him. In their hearts there were only a few people who were qualified to be the number 1 perfected lord. What was Mo Ling? Furthermore, Su Zimo's tone made the nascent soul paragons extremely displeased. If Yi Tianqing were the one who said that, they would be displeased and endure it. Mo Ling was unknown previously and only rose to fame in the past month. Most cultivators had not heard of him and were naturally indignant. Little granduncle master, even if you want to participate in the Paragon fight, you should take a break. Nangong Ling hurriedly sent a voice transmission with her spirit consciousness and reminded, you've just participated in the weapon refinement competition and must have expended a lot of mental energy. It's not good for you to start a fight now. At the same time, perfected Lord Panglan chuckled and shook his head. He's a young man after all. He can't control his temper. Senior brother, what do you mean? A cultivator asked. Perfected Lord Panglan said resolutely, this lad has just refined so many Khanate dermic weapons and expended a lot of energy. Now that he's in a hurry to challenge Yi Tianqing, he's undoubtedly courting death. I'm willing to bet that this person will be exhausted to death by the other paragons before Yi Tianqing even makes a move. How good was Su Zimo's hearing? Even though perfected Lord Panglan's voice was as soft as a mosquito and could not be heard clearly in the noisy crowd, he could hear it clearly. However, his expression was calm and he didn't care at all. That was because the situation that Nangong Ling and perfected Lord Panglan were worried about did not exist. Just now he was just putting on an act and didn't consume anything at all. Erikatsuki Michinoku stood up slowly and said in a deep voice, since everyone can't wait any longer, I will now announce the official start of the prodigy battle. As soon as he finished speaking, Su Zimo turned around and pointed at Yi Tianqing, who was sitting high up on the throne, and said slowly, get down here. The crowd was shocked. What was this? Did Mo Ling want to challenge the number 1 perfected monarch, Yi Tianqing? Did this person think that he had lived a long life and couldn't wait to die? Yi Tianqing sat motionlessly on the throne and looked down at Su Zimo coldly with disdain. Since he had already reached this point, he was no longer in a hurry. In his eyes, Su Zimo was already a dead man. Or rather, there was no need for him to do it personally. Fufu. What a joke. Who do you think you are to challenge my master? The 2 maidservants beside Yi Tianqing pouted their lips and sneered. Ha 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 ha. This Mo Ling doesn't even know the rules of the prodigy battle and he's jumping out to die. How interesting. A burst of laughter sounded from the crowd. Oh. Su Zimo surveyed his surroundings and asked, what are the rules of the prodigy battle? Erikatsuki Michinoku said in a deep voice, apart from the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking, Yi Tianqing and perfected Lord Panglan, all the other contestants have to fight. The other paragons will have to fight in pairs until the final 2 victors are decided before they can challenge Yi Tiancheng and perfected Lord Pang Lan. Yi Tiancheng grinned. In other words, you're not even qualified to challenge me. Su Zimo frowned and looked at Arakatsuki Michinoku. If I want to fight against Yi Tiancheng, I have to fight my way up step by step with the other paragons? That's right, Arakatsuki Michinoku nodded. Otherwise, wouldn't Yi Tiancheng be annoyed to death if everyone wants to challenge him? Oh, got it. Su Zimo nodded with an indifferent expression. He surveyed his surroundings and said indifferently, I'm going to cripple Yi Tiancheng now. Anyone who wants to stop me can come up. There's no need for a one-on-one duel. Anyone who's not convinced can come up at any time. I'll take them all on. The crowd was in an uproar. Is that person crazy? He wants to suppress all the paragons present single-handedly? I think he's truly deluded himself into being the number 1 perfected lord, and wants to sweep through all the paragons present. He truly doesn't know what's good for him. Not to mention the other cultivators, even the people from 100 Refinement sect were stunned on the spot. Little Granduncle Master must be crazy. Nangong Ling shook her head repeatedly and murmured repeatedly. Even Yi Tiancheng and perfected Lord Pang Lan would not dare to claim that he could suppress all the paragons present single-handedly. To be precise, apart from Lung Ro, Little Fatty and the others who knew about Su Zimo's background, almost no one present thought highly of him. Of course, there were a few cultivators who frowned in deep thought and reserved their opinions. Among them was Hang Chouyu of Sword Sect. Jian Wuzong reared his head in laughter and grit his teeth. This person is extremely arrogant and treats the heroes of the world as nothing. He's courting death. Not necessarily, Hang Chouyu shook his head. At the very least, in his memories, there was once such a monster incarnate who dared to make such bold claims and possessed such strength. He would never forget that person for the rest of his life. That figure had shocked him way too much in the 2 ancient battlefields. Fairy Luo Shui, the only void reversion of Snowdrift Valley for this trip, looked at the green figure and murmured softly, "What boldness! If that person isn't crazy, that boldness alone is enough to fight for the title of number 1 perfected lord." Arakatsuki Michinoku pondered for a moment and reminded, in the fight between the paragons, you're not allowed to fight to the death or target the essence spirit. There was a commotion and everyone was raging. There were already many nascent soul paragons who could not hold back and wanted to charge forward to fight Su Zimo. Chapter 949. How arrogant! I've long been pissed at you. An upper sect of the Middle Continent, a paragon of Peach Blossom Peak, stood out and strode towards Su Zimo shouting, I'm perfected Lord Tianliang. Come and meet. Before that person could finish his sentence, he felt a green figure flash before his eyes. Bang! Before he could react, he received a tremendous impact on his chest and was sent flying, spitting out blood. The person laid motionlessly on the ground. Although his essence spirit was fine, the bones in his chest were shattered by Su Zimo's punch and he fainted on the spot from the unbearable pain. This nascent soul realm prodigy of Peach Blossom Peak had only shown his face and said half a sentence before he was completely annihilated in the crowd. I heard that you're a sword cultivator as well. I'm Yin Ling of Unparalleled Sword Sect. I'm willing to spar with you. A sword cultivator rushed out from the crowd. Before he even got close, he had already drawn his sword. The sword beam was chilling. When the sword approached, it split into 2 and pierced Su Zimo's eyes with a sharp sword chi. Unparalleled Sword Sect was also one of the upper sects of the Middle Continent. Sword techniques were known for their variety and craftiness. This sword Dao was unparalleled and could be considered as one of the secret skills of the sect. If one was caught off guard, it was easy to be injured. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes. Even if he were to break through this sword technique, it was nothing more than an illusion. Although they looked like 2 long swords, only one of them was real. After cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness all year round, Su Zimo's vision was terrifying. Even without circulating his illumination dragon eye, he could see the flaws in this sword technique. Su Zimo did not dodge or retreat. Extending his finger, he flicked gently towards one of the incoming swords. Clang! The tip of his finger and sword collided. The sound of metal clashing could be heard. The true body of the sword appeared and vibrated. Yin Ling's expression changed. Even though Su Zimo had merely flicked his fingers casually, Yin Ling was the only one who could sense the terrifying power that burst forth from it. His palm was torn and blood gushed out. Yin Ling lost his grip on the long sword and it flew out of his hand. Just as he was about to withdraw and retreat, Su Zimo had already taken the initiative to rush in. Sticking close to him, he leaned lightly against him. Yin Ling felt as if a towering mountain had crashed into his body. His bones and tendons felt like they were about to break. He floated up and fell heavily onto the ground, fainting. In 2 moves he had defeated 2 Sky Prides in a row. Swish! Swish! Another 5 silhouettes appeared, occupying 5 different positions. Their feet moved in a mysterious manner as they circled around Su Zimo. These 5 were the prodigies of the 5 Elements sect. When they had just arrived at Chiguramon, Su Zimo had a conflict with the disciples of the 5 Elements sect. Now, when the 5 Elements sect heard that Su Zimo wanted to suppress the Paragons on his own, they immediately activated the 5 Elements formation and surrounded him. Arrogant brat. I want to see how long you can last in this 5 Elements formation. A 5 Elements sect Paragon said coldly. The 5 Elements formation was activated. Within the formation, anything that had anything to do with the 5 elements, be it weapons or dermic arts, would be weakened limitlessly. Furthermore, as the formation changed, the power of their dermic arts would increase exponentially as well. What 5 elements formation? Break. Su Zimo sneered and suddenly stomped the ground. Boom! The entire ground shook violently. The 5 paragons were alarmed and shuddered, nearly falling. At the same time, there was a slight pause in the activation of the formation. For others, it was difficult to capture that fleeting opening. However, who was Su Zimo? The strongest monster incarnate in history. In his eyes, that opening was the difference between victory and death. One of the 5 Elements sect paragons had just stabilized himself and wanted to continue channeling the formation when Su Zimo had already closed in and roared. That person felt his mind rumble as though he was struck by lightning and was stunned. That was because Su Zimo held back. Otherwise, if Su Zimo used Thunderclap Kill at this distance, that person's essence spirit would have been killed on the spot. Su Zimo pressed his palm gently against that person's chest. Snap! That person's chest caved in deeply and he spat out blood, fainting on the spot. Now that one of them was severely injured, the 5 Elements formation could no longer operate. In a flash, Su Zimo arrived before the 5 Elements sect cultivators and sent the remaining 4 paragons flying with a few punches and kicks. The paragons of the upper sects were as weak as infants in his hands. That person's physique is extremely strong and his melee combat is terrifying. Don't engage him in melee combat. A nascent soul paragon reminded loudly. Immediately after, more than 10 paragons stood out. However, they did not approach Su Zimo and merely stood far away, conjuring dermic arts and controlling their dermic weapons. Swoosh! 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 Dermic weapons tore through the air one after another. Many paragons no longer held back and used their trump cards right away. Rumble! Boom! Boom! Many dermic arts descended, blanketing the skies with a terrifying might. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as his hands changed continuously, conjuring a mysterious hand seal. He opened his mouth slightly and hollered softly, Pa! Instantly, Sanskrit descended and the world went silent. Su Zimo lowered his gaze with a dignified expression. A sacred and flawless Buddhist light burst forth from his body and illuminated all living beings. The Daming Dermic Seal was released together with the Daming Mantra. The power of that Dermic Seal was released to its limits. Furthermore, this was the only defensive Dermic Seal among the 6 Daming Dermic Seals, the immovable Foundation Seal. Many dermic arts descended and dissipated the moment they collided with the Buddhist light without causing any ripples. Many dermic weapons froze in midair as well, trembling slightly and unable to pierce down. Su Zimo was motionless as he conjured a dermic seal and dispelled the attacks of more than 10 paragons. When the monks of the 3 major Buddhist monasteries saw that, their expressions changed and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Among them, many of them had already recognized the origin of that dermic seal. Normally speaking, the Daming True Sutra had already been lost. It was said that the cultivators who revealed that dermic seal recently were two people who appeared 100 years ago. Chapter 950. Ming Han's words did not garner much suspicion. The cultivators merely thought that he was spouting nonsense because he could not take the consecutive blows and broke down mentally. The nascent soul paragons did not retreat as they controlled their dermic weapons and conjured dermic arts, preparing to attack Su Zimo once more. Whoosh! 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 More than 10 nascent soul paragons closed in, ready to take advantage of the situation. Su Zimo conjured hand seals and chanted Sanskrit. Boom! Golden light filled the skies. A gigantic golden palm tore through the firmaments and covered the skies, descending suddenly. The palm patterns on the golden palm were clear and shone with a blinding golden light, suppressing the dozens of nascent soul paragons in midair with a majestic aura. Kill! Many nascent soul paragons attacked one after another, and turned their dermic weapons to stab at the golden palm. Clang! 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 Many dermic weapons stabbed the palm and sparks flew. They could not shake that sacred and mighty palm at all. Even when many dermic arts struck it, there were no ripples. It was the immortal trap seal of the Daming Dermic Seal. After Su Zimo advanced to the nascent soul realm, he channeled the Daming Dermic Seal with his essence spirit. Coupled with the Daming Mantra and Mingwang prayer beads, its power was already at its limits. Rumble! The golden palm continued to suppress. Hurry dodge! Many cultivators saw that the situation was bad and wanted to break free from the range of the golden palm. However, the 5 fingers of the golden palm had already begun to bend and close, as though it was forming a cage. The immortal trap seal could even trap true immortals. No matter how the cultivators tried to escape, they could not break free from the cage formed by the 5 golden fingers. It was an extremely uncomfortable feeling. They could have escaped if they took a step forward. However, no matter how they tried to escape, they could not break free. They could only watch helplessly as the 5 fingers closed continuously, clenching the dozens of nascent soul paragons together and exerting force. Squeezed together, the dozens of paragons were gripped by the gigantic golden palm and closed continuously. The crowd was shocked when they saw that. Finally, a paragon could not hold it in any longer and shrieked hysterically with a horrified expression. Poof! Poof! Puff! Against the immense pressure, blood mist burst out from the bodies of many cultivators as their bones were crushed. Figures fell to the ground one after another. Although they didn't die, their bodies were severely injured. It would be difficult for them to recover in the future. In the blink of an eye, dozens of nascent soul realm paragons were defeated. The onlookers were shocked. Jining Jinjuan, who had been eager to make a move, stopped in his tracks. His eyes were filled with bewilderment. He was hesitant and did not dare to move forward. Powerful, ruthless, decisive in killing. Looking at the azure figure at the center of the battlefield, this was the only thought left in the minds of many cultivators. Just now, every Jining Jinjuan who went up had a miserable ending. A broken arm or leg was already considered a minor injury. Some of the cultivators' bodies were completely crippled. Jining Jinjuan, who had originally wanted to take advantage of the situation to make things difficult for him, was stunned to the spot. He did not dare to act rashly. Isn't that person a sword cultivator? How does he know Buddhist dermic arts? What dermic art is that? It doesn't seem to belong to the 6 Buddhist monasteries. Why is it so terrifying? Is that person really going to defeat all the paragons single-handedly? The initial arrogance of the crowd was completely suppressed by Su Zimo's thunderous methods. Yi Tiancheng sat on his throne with an indifferent expression. Fu, perfected Lord Panglan smiled indifferently and was indifferent. Although Su Zimo's methods were indeed powerful and shocking, they were not enough to threaten him. Furthermore, they were clear about one thing. The dozens of nascent soul paragons that Su Zimo defeated were nothing in their eyes and could be suppressed with ease. That was because true paragons were prideful. In front of everyone, true paragons could not be bothered to join forces with others. Furthermore, monster incarnates like him and Yi Tiancheng were famous. If they joined forces with others, even if they defeated Su Zimo, it would be an unfair victory. They could not afford to lose face. At that moment, all the cultivators were stunned by Su Zimo's sharp methods and did not dare to advance. Jian Wuzong sneered and finally stood out. When he saw that, perfected Lord Panglan smiled gently. You want to challenge us? The test has only just begun. Jian Wuzong, don't go. Hang Qiuyu frowned and reminded him with a voice transmission. Humph. Jian Wuzong harumphed and asked instead why? Senior brother, are you going to help me retrieve the startling dermic sword? There's no hurry. Hang Qiuyu said in a deep voice, that person's background, Fufu. Before Hang Qiuyu could finish, he was interrupted by Jian Wuzong's cold laughter. Senior brother, I think you're just going to stand by and watch me make a fool of myself, right? I'll retrieve the sword that I lost personally. You don't have to care. Jian Wuzong said coldly. He held the long sword in his hand and walked towards Su Zimo without looking back. Prepare to attack. Kill this person at all costs. Yi Tiancheng sent a voice transmission expressionlessly. The 8 maidservants beside him nodded. The third on the phenomenon ranking, Jian Wuzong, is here to avenge his previous humiliation. Previously, Jian Wuzong did not have a sword in hand and did not display his true strength. This time round we'll be able to see who's stronger. Amidst the discussions of the cultivators, Jian Wuzong walked towards Su Zimo step by step. He wielded his sword casually and sparks flashed as the tip of the sword sliced across the ground. Jian Wuzong looked lazy and was filled with flaws. However, no one dared to underestimate him. That was because no one knew when Jian Wuzong would attack. When he attacked, it would definitely be earth-shattering. The distance between the two of them closed continuously. One was still and the other was moving. The air seemed to have frozen and was suffocating. All of a sudden, an incomparably dazzling sword beam appeared and pierced towards Su Zimo's throat in an instant. It was like a bolt of lightning that tore through the night sky. It was too fast. That was the only thought left in everyone's minds. Many paragons thought instinctively. If they were in his shoes, they would not be able to react to that sword strike. Even Arikatsuki Michinoku's eyes lit up. It was no wonder why he was third on the phenomenon ranking. There were probably less than 10 Jining Xinjuan present who could defend against that single sword strike. In fact, there might even be fewer. At the same time, 8 figures moved beside Yi Tiancheng. Yi played her flute. The bitter sound of the flute sounded in a mournful manner, causing one to feel uneasy. Yi Si scattered flowers. Petals fell with a chilling killing intent. Yi Wu fanned her fan. A strong wind howled and sand and rocks flew. In a flash, Yi Air, Yi San, Yi Lu, Yi Ba and Yi Zhou summoned their dermic weapons, short swords, silver needles and curved sabers, and charged forward. The timing of the 8 maidservants' attacks was perfect. They sealed off all of Su Zimo's escape routes. There was no way to retreat. At that moment, Jian Wuzong had just attacked. Against that sword strike, everyone had to focus and wait as though they were facing an abyss. They had no other energy. However, the attack of the 8 maidservants was equivalent to pushing Su Zimo into the abyss. Perfected Lord Panglan retracted his smile. If it was just a single sword strike from Jian Wuzong, he could still receive it. However, even he would not be able to escape unscathed against this encirclement. Chapter 951. Lung Ro, Little Fatty and the others became nervous. After all, they had not seen each other for 100 years and did not know how strong Su Zimo's combat strength was. Lung Ro looked at the startling dermic sword in her hands and suddenly regretted it. Just now, if she returned the Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon to Su Zimo, it might be of some use at this critical juncture. But now, Su Zimo stood on the spot barehanded. Jian Wuzong's sword was already at his throat. At this distance, it was already too late for Su Zimo to take out his dermic weapon from his storage bag. Furthermore, Yi Tiancheng's 8 maidservants had already surrounded him and sealed off all his escape routes. Arrogant fellow, let's see where you can hide. Yi Zhou said hatefully with a cold gaze. A look of joy flashed through Jian Wuzong's eyes as well. It was as though he could see Su Zimo's throat being pierced by his sword the next moment. Ha 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 ha. Suddenly, Su Zimo reared his head in laughter. His laughter was loud and deafening. Jian Wuzong frowned slightly. Suddenly, he noticed that even in the face of such a siege, Su Zimo's eyes were filled with mockery instead of panic. Thereafter, Su Zimo said indifferently, "If I can snatch your sword once, I can do it a second time." He was the strongest monster incarnate in history. He had no intention of dodging against such an attack. There was no need for that either. Before he could finish his sentence, Su Zimo suddenly attacked. His entire arm was soft and flung out with a thud. It was like the trunk of a primordial divine elephant as it rested on the incoming sword. One coil and one tremble. "Ah!" Jian Wuzong exclaimed. He sensed an extremely terrifying power that distorted and trembled before suddenly erupting. His palm could not grip the sword at all. The sword trembled and his palm was torn. Blood seeped out of the muscles on his arm. In the blink of an eye, the sword flew out of his hand. It was actually snatched away by Su Zimo. No one could clearly see what happened when the two of them clashed. Even Jian Wuzong himself did not know. Everyone only knew that in the blink of an eye, the sword had changed hands. No one could understand the fear in Jian Wuzong's heart. Although his current sword was not a Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapon, it was still a perfect Dermic weapon that was incomparably sharp and could slice through metal like mud. It was hard for him to imagine that someone of the same level as him could actually snatch his sword away with their bare hands. Such means and such a powerful physical body had already exceeded his understanding. At that moment there was only one thought in Jian Wuzong's mind. Run! Jian Wuzong did not hesitate to retreat when his sword was snatched away. Immediately after, he felt an extremely terrifying aura that made his scalp tingle. Su Zimo put two fingers together on his left hand and formed a sword finger. Then he casually slashed in his direction. Chi! A sword chi burst forth from Su Zimo's fingertip. It was white and bedazzling. Instantly the world shook and the weather changed. Heaven-slaying sword art. The snatching of the sword and counterattack happened at almost the same time. Even all the cultivators in the mystic courtyard felt a shuddering killing intent that emitted a bone-chilling chill, let alone Jian Wuzong. Pust! The crowd sucked in a cold breath. What a terrifying sword chi! Apart from sword sect, was there such a terrifying sword art in Tianhuang mainland? I've got it! Heavenly Dipper Changpeng was crippled by that sword chi. Someone exclaimed. Initially, Dao Lord Penglan had the intention of watching the show. However, after the sword chi burst forth, he felt a chill run down his spine. Instinctively, Dao Lord Penglan sat upright with a grim expression. Arikatsuki Michinoku's expression changed slightly, and she narrowed her eyes. She was the Dharma Dao Jun and her cultivation realm was far superior to everyone else's. She could sense it more clearly. It was clear that Mo Ling had yet to unleash the true power of that sword chi. Even so, that sword chi was enough to destroy everything. Just now Jian Wuzong's attack paled in comparison to that sword chi. Like a child waving a sword randomly. The cultivators at the side felt their hearts skip a beat. It was obvious what Jian Wuzong's current situation was. It was as though he could smell the aura of death. Jian Wuzong's pupils constricted violently as he conjured hand seals repeatedly. Dermic power surged and a gigantic dermic power sword was formed between his palms. Slay! Jian Wuzong roared and waved the dermic power sword, slashing towards the incoming sword chi. Shing! There was a soft sound. It was almost inaudible. The dermic power sword in Jian Wuzong's hands was sliced into two by the white sword chi, and dissipated instantly. However, the sword chi did not stop and pierce Jian Wuzong's chest. Sword sect's dermic arts could not defend against that sword chi at all. Jian Wuzong's expression was menacing and the veins on his neck popped. His eyes were filled with indignation. Although the sword chi might not be able to kill him, it would definitely destroy his body after entering his body. Even if it was in the sword sect, he'd never seen such terrifying sword chi. I'm indignant. Jian Wuzong let out a final roar. All of a sudden, just as Jian Wuzong was about to give up, a huge tug came from his arm and pulled him back. Jian Wuzong's figure floated and fell in front of sword sect's formation. As he shifted his gaze, he saw a familiar figure standing in front of him. Senior brother. Jian Wuzong was shocked. Hang Qiuyu still stood out when his life was on the line. Senior brother, help me kill him. Jian Wuzong shouted through gritted teeth. Hang Qiuyu did not say anything. He could not say anything either. It was only when he truly stood before the sword Qi that Hang Qiuyu felt fear. Unknowingly, beads of sweat had already appeared on his face. Buzz! Hang Qiuyu attacked. An incomparably dazzling sword beam appeared. 6 dermic patterns. A Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon. Wherever the sword beam passed, all life in the void seemed to be taken away by the sword. Lifeless sword art. This sword art was a secret skill that the founder master of Sword Sect deduced from one of the 3 ancient sword arts, and was shockingly powerful. Clang! The sword Qi collided with the tip of the sword. Endless killing intent spread. The void at the point of collision seemed to be sliced into pieces. Hang Qiuyu shuddered and staggered 3 steps back. With every step he took, the soles of his feet sank deeply into the ground, leaving behind a clear footprint. The terrifying sword Qi finally dissipated. However, Hang Qiuyu's sword-wielding arm was still trembling uncontrollably. Even with his Khanate dermic weapon coupled with the lifeless sword art, he could only barely defend against the sword Qi. What was the background of that sword Qi? What frightened Hang Qiuyu even more was not the sword Qi. It was the person who released it. After releasing the sword Qi, Mo Ling turned around and faced Yi Tianqing's 8 maidservants. He did not turn back again. He did not even look at them. Who could match this kind of self-confidence? What truly caused Hang Qiuyu's heart to sink into the abyss was the person's identity. Chapter 952. On the battlefield. Su Zimo snatched the sword and released the heaven-slaying sword art in reverse. It was only a matter of seconds. At that moment, the attacks of Yi Tianqing's 8 maidservants had already descended. The first to arrive was Yi Yi's flute. The mournful sound of the flute could disrupt the minds of cultivators, and even affect their essence spirits. Unfortunately, Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, and his 7 orifices were extremely powerful. The sound of the flute could not affect his mind at all. As for affecting his origin spirit, that was even more impossible. With the Mingwang prayer beads around, the sound of the flute could not even penetrate that layer of defense. Immediately after, a strong gust of wind swept over. If it was a cultivator with a weaker physique, they would have been swept up by the gust or staggered and swayed. Unfortunately, Su Zimo's physique was strong and his feet stood firmly on the ground as though they were rooted. Yi Si's petals flew over with the gust. Yi Tu, Yi San, Yi Lu, Yi Ba, and Yi Jiu had already closed in as well. At that moment, Su Zimo had just snatched the sword from Jian Wuzong's hands and turned around. With a twist of his wrist, the sword buzzed and vibrated. Snatching the sword, counterattacking, turning and swinging the sword. It was done in a single breath. Whoosh! Su Zimo waved the sword in his hands and slashed viciously at the void before him. The sound of a tsunami could be heard when the sword slashed down. Thereafter, under the gazes of many cultivators, a boundless ocean seemed to have appeared on the battlefield. In the middle of the ocean, waves surged and spun continuously, forming a gigantic vortex that rumbled with a terrifying might. The entire space seemed to have distorted under the influence of the terrifying vortex. Su Zimo used his sword as a saber and released the vortex of the sea calming manual. Thus, what a strong sword intent! What sword technique is that? It seems to lack the sharpness of the sword Dao and instead seems more dignified? A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. There were 3 levels to the sword Dao: sword move, sword force, and sword intent. Sword moves were the most obvious, and the sword momentum required one to comprehend some of the momentum within the sword move. Before reaching the nascent soul realm, cultivators could at most comprehend force. That was because the last level of sword intent required one's primordial spirit to channel dermic powers and derive the concept in the depths of the move. The power of a top-level sword intent would not be weaker than a spell. Furthermore, be it sword intent or saber intent, after releasing them, the might of the sword technique would increase tremendously and could even affect the mind of a cultivator. Just like right now, many cultivators seem to be looking at a majestic whirlpool in the ocean. When he saw that, Hang Qiuyu's eyes widened and his body shuddered. He seemed to have thought of something. His eyes first flashed with realization, then shock and finally fear. Sword intent? Hearing the discussions in the crowd, Hang Qiuyu wanted to laugh, but he couldn't. The vortex move of the sea calming manual was mainly for defense. With a slash of the saber, the space distorted. Although Su Zimo had slashed out with his longsword, the concept was the same, and its power was astonishing. Many petals that floated over were swept into the whirlpool, drifting with the waves as though they had lost their direction. Yi Tu, Yi San and the other two had just charged forward when their movements slowed down, and they were almost dragged away from their original spot. Yi Nine's gaze was sinister as she charged forward against the pressure and waved her hand. From her sleeves, a dense cluster of silver needles shot out. Before they even got close, they emitted a pungent stench. Poison. That method was familiar, and was the same as the moves of poison sect cultivators. Su Zimo sneered internally and took a deep breath of air. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and roared as the poison needles were about to pierce his face. Kill! Thunderclap Kill was released. Boom! That voice sounded like thunder in the ears of the 8 maidservants. The first to suffer a backlash was Yi, who was playing the flute. The flute was interrupted instantly. Yi grunted dully and her face turned pale instantly. A series of cracks appeared on the flute. It was clearly crippled. Furthermore, Su Zimo's roar was released with the power of his lungs and a massive air current gushed out of his mouth. The cluster of poison needles was blown away by Su Zimo's breath. Immediately after, a series of incomparably stunning sword beams followed. A series of ripples seemed to have appeared in the voids, rippling towards Yi Tu, Yi San and the others. Sea calming manual ripple. Like before, he released his saber intent with his long sword. The sword beam was chilling and sliced across Yi Tu and Yi San's throats rapidly. Both of them were stunned on the spot as their minds went blank from the shock of Thunderclap Kill. By the time they reacted, they felt themselves rising and spinning in midair. They were looking at their own corpses. Headless corpses. 2 gigantic heads were severed by Su Zimo's sword. Yi 8 and Yi 9 were the closest to Su Zimo. The impact of Thunderclap Kill on the two of them was also the strongest. Both of their nostrils, ears, mouths and eyes were already bleeding. They were bleeding from all 7 orifices. The two of them fell straight to the ground. Before they could even touch the ground, 2 more heads flew into the air. In the blink of an eye, Yi 6 was the only one left of the 5 who charged forward. Her physique was the strongest among the 5 of them, and that was the reason why she could hold on. Yu, however, the moment she said a single word, Su Zimo had already walked over. Without giving her any chance, he slashed with his sword. Swoosh! That single slash created a torrential wave. Yi 6 had just raised her curved saber when she was sent flying by the slash. Su Zimo severed her head casually. Of the 8 maidservants, only 3 were left. The 3 of you can forget about leaving as well. Su Zimo advanced with his sword. Wherever his sword passed, ripples appeared and enveloped the 3 of them. They could not escape at all. Cling! Clang! Both parties had only exchanged 3 to 4 rounds. 3 heads with fresh blood spewing flew high into the air and fell into the dust before long. There were many Jining Xinjuan who attacked Su Zimo, but the 8 maidservants had the worst outcome. It was like karma. Initially, one of the maidservants was the one who chopped off the head of a Jining Xinjuan. She was unreasonable and no one dared to refute her. But now this was the outcome for all of them. It's said that sword cultivators are ruthless and decisive in killing. Now that I've seen it for myself, they truly live up to their reputation. That Mo Ling is way too ruthless. He doesn't know how to take care of women at all. The crowd was secretly speechless. Who are you? Right then a voice sounded from the side. It seemed to be questioning, but it was also suppressing something as the voice trembled slightly. Hang Qiuyu glared at Su Zimo fixedly and his sword-wielding arm trembled slightly as he asked once more, "Who are you?" He could tell that it was not sword intent but saber intent. If one was not the successor of Divine Phoenix Island, there was only a single person in Tianhuang mainland who understood that saber intent. Benefactor, where did you learn the damning true scripture from? Please tell me. The Void Reversion monks of Wisdom Monastery, Hollow Monastery and Formless Monastery stood out at the same time and asked loudly with unfriendly expressions, "Fufu." Suddenly, Yi Tiancheng laughed and said coolly, Do you really think that you can fool everyone by using a sword as a saber and releasing saber intent? He was the number one of the phenomenon ranking and the number one perfected lord of the Middle Continent. There was naturally no way Suzumo's methods could be hidden from him. Right then, Arakatsuki Michinoku stood up slowly and his might descended as he said sternly, "You hid your true appearance. Who are you to hide at the Thousand Crane Tea Party?" Chapter 953. The crowd was stunned. Everyone from 100 Refinement Sect was stunned on the spot as well. Yi Tiancheng, Hang Choyu and the monks of the Buddhist monasteries were all aggressive as they interrogated Suzumo. Right now, even Arakatsuki Michinoku stood out. Furthermore, Arakatsuki Michinoku had an unfriendly expression. It was clear that he was truly enraged. Nangong Ling and the other two looked at each other with confused expressions. Wasn't that little Granduncle Master's original appearance? Was little Granduncle Master hiding his identity? What was his original identity and why did he have to hide it? Lung Ro, Little Fatty and the others looked nervous. At that moment, everyone's gazes were on the green-robed man in the center of the battlefield. Suzumo smiled indifferently and was calm. He had long expected this to happen. Now that things had come to this, there was no need to hide anymore. A series of crackling sounds could be heard from Suzumo's body as the muscles on his face twitched. In the blink of an eye, his appearance changed drastically and he turned into a handsome cultivator. His black hair fluttered and his green robes were upright. His eyes were deep and he exuded a powerful aura that caused one's heart to shudder. Hang Chuyu was shocked and took half a step back instinctively. His eyes were filled with fear and his breathing quickened. Fairy Luo Shui of Snowdrift Valley's eyes lit up as she stood up. "Ah!" Tang Yu of Elixir Yang Sect exclaimed softly and covered her mouth hurriedly with surprise in her eyes. "Wow!" Ruxian exclaimed and chuckled. "So little Granduncle Master looks like this. He's quite handsome." Yi Tiancheng, perfected Lord Panglan and the others had never seen Suzumo before and naturally had no reaction. However, there was an unusual commotion in the crowd. "It's him. He's still alive." Unknowingly, 100 years have passed since that incident. Arakatsuki Michinoku frowned. Many of the cultivators present clearly recognized this person, but when they discussed, their voices were suppressed and they didn't even mention this person's name. It was as if this name had become a taboo. Arakatsuki Michinoku asked again, "Who are you?" "My name is Suzumo." Suzumo looked around and said slowly with a calm expression. In an instant, the entire mystic courtyard became so silent that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. That name seemed to have an invisible power that could intimidate the cultivators so much that they did not dare to speak, breathe or act rashly. Suzumo, the top of the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago, the unprecedented monster of history. In the two primordial battlefields, he had suppressed the paragons of various major sects and was invincible among his peers. He had never tasted defeat. He had created an unprecedented Jindan phenomenon and left his name on the ancient phenomenon stele. In the minds of many cultivators, all sorts of legends regarding this name appeared. Of course, the most terrifying legends were about the catastrophe of the paragons that happened in Myriad Phenomenon City, 100 years ago during the fight for the phenomenon ranking. Legend has it that during that catastrophe, 2 foreign races descended and massacred wantonly. Corpses were strewn all over the city and blood flowed into rivers. Countless paragons were killed. More than half of the paragons on the phenomenon ranking were dead. Thankfully, this person protected the final dignity of the human race and fought a bloody battle to the death. He only managed to kill the 2 foreign races after expending almost all of his stamina. Of course, the various major sects and factions forbade the spread of this matter later on, and many cultivators who survived kept it a secret as well. As time passed by, many details were gradually drowned in the river of time. This matter also became a legend. After 100 years, not many people believed it to be true. As for some of the juniors, they treated it as a joke and never took it seriously. Notwithstanding others, Nangong Ling, Ruxian and the others of 100 Refinement Sect were already disdainful of Suzumo in their previous chats. However, among the cultivators present, There were many cultivators who had been there and were lucky enough to survive. Hang Qiuyu was one of them. Fairy Luoshui as well. There were others as well. Almost all the cultivators who survived the catastrophe back then entered the nascent soul realm and became paragons of the nascent soul realm, arriving here. In the hearts of these paragons, that name was invincible and taboo. This person was the true number one of the phenomenon ranking. Now that this person was at the nascent soul realm, he was the number one perfected lord. Not the number one perfected lord of the middle continent, but the number one perfected lord of Tianhuang mainland. Little granduncle master, he's actually Su Zimo? Ru Xian opened her mouth in disbelief. Could the legend of the past be true? Nangong Ling murmured softly in a daze as well. Yu Hanyan had a conflicted expression. She had long noticed Su Zimo's abnormality. However, she had not expected their granduncle master to have such a powerful background. Everything seemed to have an explanation now. Su Zimo was probably the only one who had the boldness to shout at Yi Qiancheng and tell him to get down. Su Zimo was the only one who could beat Jian Wuzong, who was third on the phenomenon ranking to the point that he could not even draw his sword. Su Zimo was the only one who dared to take on all the paragons present single-handedly. No wonder. Yu Hanyan looked at Leng Ro and the others who were not far away. She finally understood why Su Zimo wanted to stand out and help Leng Ro and the others withstand the immense pressure from Yi Tiancheng and Arikitsuki Michinoku. Arikitsuki Michinoku narrowed her eyes with a conflicted expression. With her status, she naturally knew everything that had happened in Wanxiang City 100 years ago. No matter what, the Chiguramon owed Su Zimo a debt of gratitude for the battle 100 years ago. Or rather, all the paragons and sects that survived 100 years ago owed Su Zimo a huge debt of gratitude. However, Su Zimo's situation was complicated. This person had already offended many super sects such as Glass Palace, Chaos Essence Sect and Zephyr Thunder Palace. All of them wanted to kill him. Furthermore, this person cultivated a demon cultivation technique. Up till now, no one knew if he was a human or demon. As the master of a sect of the Chiguramon, Arikitsuki Michinoku was hesitant about how to deal with this person. If he was killed, it would be morally unacceptable. If he was not killed, it would be equivalent to offending a few super sects. For a moment, Arikitsuki Michinoku fell silent as well. This was an unprecedented and strange scene. A single name caused the entire mystic courtyard to fall silent. Senior brother, what are you waiting for? Go kill that person and help me avenge my humiliation. Jian Wuzong could not help but nudge Hang Qiuyu. Hang Qiuyu glared at Su Zimo with a dark expression without saying anything. Jian Wuzong grit his teeth and said hatefully, "He can't release that sword art a second time within a short period of time. Senior brother, help me kill him." Shut up. Hang Qiuyu suddenly turned around and slapped Jian Wuzong in the face. Jian Wuzong was stunned by the slap. Hang Qiuyu glared at Jian Wuzong with a cold gaze and said coldly, "Get lost. Don't embarrass yourself here. Do you know who he is?" "Senior brother, are you afraid?" Jian Wuzong roared in laughter. What happened 100 years ago was merely a rumor. To think that you would be frightened by someone who was exaggerated. Ha 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 ha. Rumor. Hang Qiuyu replied coldly, "It's all true." "How do you know? You didn't witness it personally." Jian Wuzong could not continue. He suddenly recalled that Hang Qiuyu was ranked 8th on the phenomenon ranking 100 years ago, and had experienced everything in Myriad Phenomenon City personally. Chapter 954. Hang Qiuyu looked at Su Zimo, who was not far away, with a conflicted expression. Although they had only exchanged half a move, he knew in his heart that the difference between the two of them was even greater. At that moment, the moment he said the word Su Zimo, he realized that he no longer had the courage to attack this person. The void reversion of Sword Sect narrowed his eyes with a cold glint as he asked suspiciously, "Is this person really as powerful as the legends say?" "Yes." Hang Qiuyu did not hesitate and replied with certainty. "Fufu." The void reversion of Sword Sect sneered. "No matter what, this person is only the number one of the phenomenon ranking. There are two people at the top of the phenomenon ranking here, and he doesn't have any extra heads or arms." Hang Qiuyu shook his head. Throughout history, there have been many people at the top of the phenomenon ranking. However, he's different. Fufu, what's so different about him? The void reversion of Sword Sect sneered again. What are you trying to do? Hang Qiuyu turned around and asked with a frown. The void reversion of Sword Sect said coldly, I heard that this person is a demon. Since he's a demon, we'll naturally kill him with all our might. There's no need for morality. Hang Qiuyu said sternly, I advise you not to have any designs on him. Hang Qiuyu said that from the bottom of his heart. Outsiders who had not experienced the catastrophe of Myriad Phenomenon City personally would never be able to understand how terrifying this green-robed scholar was. No matter how strong he is, can he defeat a void reversion and defend against the sword in my hands? The void reversion of Sword Sect pouted. To think that it's as Jian Wuzong said, you're already afraid. Hang Qiuyu, you've truly disappointed me. I admit that I'm afraid. Hang Qiuyu did not hide anything and paused for a moment before changing the topic. However, even if I'm not afraid, I won't attack him. Any cultivator of the Sword Sect can attack him, but I can't. 100 years ago, I owed him my life. The void reversion of Sword Sect harumphed and did not say anything else. Snowdrift Valley's Ling Bai glared at Su Zimo and licked his lips. There was a hint of excitement in his eyes as he was raring to go. Not every genius would feel fear upon hearing this name. Although Ling Bai was ranked 20th on the phenomenon ranking, he had obtained a great opportunity after advancing to the nascent soul realm, and believed that he was not weaker than the other nascent soul paragons. At the Thousand Crane Tea Party this time, he had also been holding back, and wanted to amaze the world with a single feat. Right then, the void reversion of Snowdrift Valley, Fairy Luo Shui, stood out and cupped her fists towards Su Zimo with a smile. It's been 100 years since we parted in Myriad Phenomenon City. Do you still remember me, Brother Su? Fairy's elegance is not inferior to men. How could I forget? Su Zimo said with a smile. Back in Wanxiang City, only 3 of the 13 Jining Xinjuan did not choose to escape. Fairy Luo Shui was one of them. Fairy Luo Shui also knew that this was not the time to reminisce about the past. She only said a few words of greeting before retreating. Snowdrift Valley disciples, listen up. Fairy Luo Shui said slowly, you can fight if you want, but no one is allowed to attack Su Zimo. Oh, why? Ling Bai was indignant and asked with a frown. Fairy Luo Shui said indifferently, continue watching. I won't harm you guys. Since he's here, there's nothing to be afraid of at this Thousand Crane Tea Party unless the Dharma Daojun appears. At the mention of Su Zimo's name, some were wary, some were fearful and some were indifferent. Perfected Lord Panglan was one of them. He was the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking 400 years ago and was half a step into the void reversion realm. You're wrong again, Su Zimo shook his head. Since I've returned 100 years later, I'm the number 1 perfected lord. You're not allowed to touch that title unless I allow it. You're not allowed to touch that title unless I allow it. His words were extremely domineering and an invisible aura crushed over. Yi Tiancheng even felt a sense of pressure. So what if I want to? Yi Tiancheng glared at Su Zimo with a menacing expression and said word by word. Su Zimo's gaze was like a knife as he said slowly, I'll kill you if you dare to lay your hands on it. Chapter 955. Kill me. Yi Tiancheng smiled sinisterly and turned to look at Arikatsuki Michinoku, who was not far away, saying coldly, today, this is a personal feud between Chaos Essence Sect and that person. It's not within the scope of the Paragon competition. Arikatsuki Michinoku, please don't interfere. In other words, the two of them were going to have a life and death battle. Suddenly, Dao Being Chi-Gai of Zephyr Thunder Palace stood up. Everyone, don't forget that we don't know if this lad is human or demon. Initially, Zephyr Thunder Palace was watching from the sidelines. However, there was no way they would let Su Zimo off now that his true identity was exposed. Back in Myriad Phenomenon City, the Paragon of Zephyr Thunder Palace died in the hands of Night Spirit. In order to snatch the Purple Thunder Manual, Perfected Lord Tianming of Zephyr Thunder Palace was turned into a pool of blood by Su Zimo, and his essence spirit was destroyed. Be it for revenge or the Purple Thunder Manual, Zephyr Thunder Palace naturally could not sit still when they saw Suzimo reappear and stood out. The Void Reversion of Hellfire Hall said hatefully, "If he's a demon and wants to sneak into the Thousand Crane Tea Party to obtain the supreme grade mystic tea, causing internal strife between the major sects, his intentions are merciless. Patriarch Lanue should kill him directly as a warning to others." Ming Han's throat was crushed by Suzimo and his essence spirit was damaged. Even if he woke up, it would be difficult for him to regain his former glory. Hellfire Hall hated Suzimo to the core. "That's right. The Void Reversion of Sword sect harumphed. I heard that this lad is even sworn brothers with a group of demons. If he's not a demon, what is he?" The super sects expressed their opinions one after another. Arikitsuki Michinoku took a deep breath and had no choice but to stand out. She slapped her storage bag and took out a shimmering mirror. Tossing it gently into the air, she tapped it gently with her fingertip. A stream of dermic powers entered it. Whoosh! The mirror shone brightly and a gigantic beam of light landed on Suzimo. Demon Revealing Mirror. The Demon Revealing Mirror was a Dharma treasure specially created by the Weapon Emperor of the ancient era to restrain demons. It had no effect on cultivators but was extremely harmful to demons. Legend had it that a true demon revealing mirror could turn all demons into ashes with a single beam of light. It was extremely terrifying. The later demon revealing mirrors were all imitations. Although it was not as powerful as the real demon revealing mirror, it was still very effective against demons. Under the illumination of the demon revealing mirror, the demons had nowhere to hide and would reveal their true forms. Furthermore, his primordial spirit and dermic powers would be suppressed. Back in the intermediate ancient battlefield, Glass Palace relied on a few demon revealing mirrors to set up a formation that trapped Suzimo on the spot. Now the mirror in Arikitsuki Michinoku's hand was a replica of the demon revealing mirror. Even so, the demon revealing mirror was a Tao Lord dermic weapon, and had an absolute suppressive effect against a nascent soul demon. Lung Ro, Little Fatty, and the others immediately tensed up. However, they soon realized that there was no need for that. Under the beam of the demon revealing mirror, Suzimo stood with his hands behind his back with an indifferent expression. He was not affected at all. In no way did he look like a demon being suppressed. After advancing to the nascent soul realm, Suzimo cultivated 2 essence spirits. Right now, the black-haired essence spirit in his consciousness was condensed from cultivating the top cultivation techniques of the immortal and Buddhist Taoists of the human race. It was incomparably pure and would not be affected at all. As for the scarlet-haired Een spirit, it hid in the depths of his consciousness and would not be detected unless someone's spirit consciousness probed. Everyone from Zephyr Thunder Palace and Chaos Essence sect frowned when they saw that. Could the rumors be false? Or could it be that this person had some sort of method that could deceive even the demon revealing mirror? Arikitsuki Michinoku was expressionless, as he put away the demon revealing mirror and waved his hand. "Settle your feud yourselves." Boom! Before his sentence was finished, Yi Tiancheng had already leaped up from his throne. His glabella shone as he conjured hand seals repeatedly and hollered, "Firmament art." Dermic powers were like silk at Yi Tiancheng's fingertips, forming a boundless firmament that enveloped Suzimo. Firmament art, the top dermic art of Chaos Essence sect. The firmament was like a blanket that enveloped the entire world. Under the cover of the sky, all living beings would be suppressed. An unimaginable pressure crushed down, as though the entire sky had collapsed and covered the skies. How was that a fight against humans? This was a battle against the heavens, a struggle against the heavens. How could that be done with the power of a human? It's way too scary. Sensing the surging dermic powers on the battlefield, the expressions of the cultivators changed as they exclaimed. Just now the battle was just now. The dermic arts released by many nascent soul paragons were child's play against this dermic art. As expected of Yi Tiancheng, Nangong Ling murmured with a shocked expression. He's only at early stage nascent soul, but he's already able to cultivate such vast dermic powers. If he really cultivates to late stage or perfected nascent soul, how strong will he be? Ru Xian and the others were worried as well. Even though they were not involved, they felt immense pressure. It was hard to imagine how Suzimo, who was at the center of the battlefield, would react against the firmament art. Suzimo did not move at all. He merely stood on the spot with his hands behind his back. He raised his head slightly and looked at the descending firmament with disdain. He could tell that the dermic art was extremely strong. However, Yi Tianqing was far from releasing the power of the dermic art. Firmament art? Su Zimo smiled gently. With a bang, he stomped his feet on the ground and leaped into the air, punching towards the descending firmament. The crowd was in an uproar when they saw that. Against that dermic art, Su Zimo did not summon any dermic weapons, conjure any dermic arts or use any secret skills. Instead, he chose to fight against it with his physical body. Enveloped by the vast firmament, a tiny figure rose against the momentum. It looked like a moth darting into a flame. However, the collision between the two was earth-shattering. Boom! Su Zimo's fist collided heavily against the descending firmament. Instantly, the world went silent. It was as though everything was frozen. Beneath the firmaments, a seemingly tiny figure extended his fist and attacked the firmament, as though he wanted to tear through the firmaments and penetrate the world. Crack! Crack! A series of cracking sounds could be heard. Right in front of countless gazes, cracks appeared in the firmaments one after another. They widened and extended continuously, filling the entire sky in the blink of an eye. It shattered. The firmaments shattered. The domineering firmament art was shattered by a single punch from Su Zimo. What a terrifying physique! That person's physique is probably not weaker than divine weapons. A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. Good, good, good. Yi Tianqing reared his head in laughter without any fear in his eyes as he shouted, Su Zimo, you did not disappoint me indeed. Swoosh! Swoosh! Swinging his sleeves, Yi Tianqing shot cold beams of light towards Su Zimo at an extremely fast speed. 49 flying swords tore through the air with streaking sword chi. Ah, it's a set of flying swords. Suddenly, the void reversion of ancient array Sex said, I remember now. This is a set of flying swords that Chaos Essence Sex Patriarch personally refined for Chaos Essence Sex Patriarch when he visited 10 years ago. To think that this set of flying swords would be in Yi Tianqing's hands. Could it be? The 49 flying swords were suppressed by the mystic magnet mountain once more. Not only that, the purple thunderstorm was already moving in the direction of Yi Tianqing, wanting to engulf him as well. All the cultivators held their breaths and focused, their eyes filled with shock. It was as though those two bedazzling figures were the only ones left in the world. The fight between the two of them caused the weather to change and the world to quake. A fight as such had far surpassed the cultivators' understanding of Jining Zhenjuan's strength. Vast ocean. Yi Tianqing finally put away the contempt in his heart. His eyes misted over as he opened his mouth and spat out two words. Splash. A vast ocean appeared behind Yi Tianqing. He was within it, as though he was one with the ocean. Yi Tianqing's figure turned blurry. Ah, it's his Jindan phenomenon. It's because of that Jindan phenomenon that he swept through the Jindan realm and dominated the phenomenon ranking. A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. As long as cultivators were willing to comprehend and deduce, many Jindan phenomenons could be converted into dermic arts that belonged to them. Of course, the process of deduction was extremely long and boring. There were also many paragons who wasted their time without gaining anything. Vast ocean surged and engulfed the purple thunderstorm instantly. Layers of waves rose from the ocean and engulfed Su Zimo. It was only at this moment that Su Zimo's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. Interesting, Su Zimo murmured softly. All of a sudden, beneath his feet, a colossal creature emerged. The massive object had 4 legs and 2 heads. It carried a gigantic shell on its body that was filled with mysterious ravines. It was ancient and seemed as though it could understand the mysteries of heaven and earth. Its shell propped up the firmaments and its 4 legs were indomitable as it moved continuously against the ocean. Roar! The heads of the tortoise snake reared their heads and roared into the skies with divine light shining in all directions. Heaven and earth shook. Tortoise snake phenomenon, the descent of the black tortoise. To think that I would be able to see this phenomenon again after 100 years. Hang Choyu's expression was emotional. Instantly, it was as though he had returned to Myriad Phenomenon City where the paragons fought and the phenomenons collided. Jian Wuzong said sourly, "Humph, they're both Jindan phenomenons of the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. There's not much difference." "The difference is way too great." Hang Chuyu shook his head and did not explain further. That was because the result of this collision of phenomenons after 100 years would be revealed very soon. Su Zimo rode on the tortoise snake and moved against the current. The distance between the two of them closed continuously. Yi Tianqing's expression was unchanged and his figure turned increasingly illusory. Bright moon. By the time he said that, his figure had already vanished above the ocean. Then between the sea and the sky, a bright moon slowly rose, sprinkling down rays of silver light onto the surface of the sea. The sparkling waves were as beautiful as a painting. Yi Tianqing had already fused completely into his phenomenon. Songhai Mingyue, number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. This was also the Jindan phenomenon created by Yi Tianqing that was unprecedented and unprecedented. Songhai Mingyue? Su Zimo smiled gently and his figure blurred for a moment before vanishing as well. On the wide and thick turtle shell, raging flames surged and a green lotus grew. Under the burning of the raging flames, the green color gradually faded, and it bloomed with dazzling golden light. Swoosh! Suddenly the golden lotus moved. It collided fiercely towards the rising moon between the horizon and the ocean. Boom! There was a deafening sound. Cracks appeared on the bright moon one after another. The picturesque scene was shattered instantly as Yi Tianqing's figure fell out. His face was pale and his clothes were in a mess as he staggered in retreat. Su Zimo's figure appeared as well, his green robes fluttering without a speck of dust. The result of the clash between the two phenomenons had already been revealed. It was clear who was superior. Su Zimo strode forward and said indifferently, "Even if you're the true bright moon, I can suppress you." Chapter 957. Yi Tianqing was very strong. As the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking, he had created an unprecedented Jindan phenomenon and left his name on the ancient phenomenon stele. His hands were stained with the blood of more than one void reversion. He had killed an opponent who was a major cultivation realm above him. All of that was enough to prove his strength. He was only at early stage nascent soul. He was not the only one. Even others did not dare to imagine what kind of combat strength he would possess once he cultivated to late stage or perfected nascent soul. Yi Tianqing had never tasted defeat throughout his cultivation journey. To him, fighting above his cultivation realm was as normal as eating and drinking. He did have the strength to do so. Unfortunately, he had chosen the wrong opponent. Among those of the same cultivation realm, there was no one who could fight against Su Zimo, let alone the fact that he was 2 minor cultivation realms lower than Su Zimo. Their dermic powers were not on the same level. Yi Tianqing was defeated miserably in the collision of phenomenons. If not for the fact that he had a powerful defensive dermic weapon, he would have been severely injured in this clash. Little Granduncle Master actually gained the upper hand? Nangong Ling was secretly speechless. They had personally witnessed Yi Tianqing sweeping through those of the same cultivation realm in a domineering and invincible manner. In the hearts of many of them, Yi Tianqing was the symbol of invincibility. They truly did not expect that someone of the same cultivation realm would be able to gain the upper hand against Yi Tianqing. "I'm afraid it's not as simple as gaining the upper hand." Yu Hanyan shook her head. Right from the beginning, has Yi Tianqing truly retaliated against Granduncle Master? Nangong Ling and Ru Xian were stunned. Yi Tianqing had powerful methods and many trump cards. Although he appeared endlessly and even released his Jindan phenomenon, all of them were destroyed by Su Zimo. This was not gaining the upper hand, this was a crushing defeat. On the battlefield, the distance between the two sides was rapidly closing. Yi Tianqing narrowed his eyes and took out a pitch-black mountain from his storage bag unhurriedly, smashing it towards Su Zimo. The mountain continued to expand, its surface flickering with rays of light. This mountain peak was actually a perfect magical artifact. Su Zimo's expression remained unchanged. His glabella flickered, and a green lotus throne flew out. Compared to the Black Mountain, the Green Lotus platform looked incomparably small. However, when the two collided, an earth-shattering sound erupted. Boom! Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the mountain peak, the perfect dermic artifact, was actually smashed into smithereens by the Green Lotus platform. Hiss! The crowd was aghast. A perfected Lord Dermic weapon was destroyed just like that. Even Khanate perfected Lord Dermic weapons would not be able to produce such terrifying lethality. It's Qinglian of creation. Right then, a void reversion of the Buddhist monasteries exclaimed as he recognized the origin of the Green Lotus platform. Heavens, the Qinglian of creation has already revived and grown to grade 5. How did that person do it? This is way too scary. With the Qinglian of creation in his hands, whose dermic weapon can compare to it? The monks of the Buddhist monasteries were shocked. The mountain peak exploded. Amidst the flying sand and rocks, Yi Tianqing's figure suddenly appeared and lunged over with a stone hammer in his hands. He seemed to have expected that the mountain peak would not be able to stop Su Zimo. The stone hammer looked ordinary and crude. However, it emitted an extremely ancient aura, as though it came from the primordial era. Shatter! Yi Tianqing raised his arm and smashed it towards Su Zimo's head. Su Zimo's expression changed. The Qinglian of creation tore through the void and collided with the stone hammer. Boom! There was another deafening sound. The stone hammer flew out of his hands. The Qinglian of creation was sent flying as well, turning into a streak of green light that fell into the crowd. Yi Tianqing shuddered and his eyes shone with disbelief. Although the stone hammer in his hands did not have any dermic patterns, it had a great background and could even shatter a Khanate perfected Lord dermic weapon. To think that he would lose his grip on the stone hammer and fly out of his hands after colliding with the Qinglian of creation. Su Zimo's eyes were filled with surprise as well. The grade 5 creation Qinglian of creation was already comparable to Khanate Dao being dermic weapons. He had not expected that the stone hammer would not shatter. Of course, that did not affect the entire situation. Yi Tianqing was slightly stunned. However, Su Zimo did not hesitate at all. He strode forward and extended his palm, clenching it into a fist and punching Yi Tianqing. Yi Tianqing reacted and was fearless. Instead, he retaliated with a punch. Bang! The two fists collided in a crushing manner. Yi Tianqing grunted dully and his expression changed starkly. His physique was definitely not weak, and he was only a step away from cultivating tsunami blood. To think that his fist would nearly shatter after exchanging a single punch with Su Zimo. The pain was unbearable. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo reared his head in laughter. Yi Tianqing, you're still far from being comparable to Diyin. Previously, the two of them fought in Myriad Phenomenon City. Because Su Zimo could not use his demon blood qi, he was disadvantaged in melee combat and was suppressed by Diyin. He had no choice but to release dermic arts to counterattack and recover his losses. But now, Su Zimo had suppressed Yi Tianqing with his physique alone without even activating his bloodline. Not necessarily. Yi Tianqing's voice was cold and a ruthless glint flashed through his eyes. Immediately after, a series of strange fluctuations burst forth from his eyes, as though the entire world was spinning. Time was in chaos and space was distorted. Two beams of light burst forth from Yi Tianqing's eyes and collided in midair, forming a gigantic wheel that crushed over slowly, as though it wanted to engulf the entire world. The wheel was all-encompassing, as though it could reverse the 5 elements, throw yin and yang into chaos and flip the universe, causing all living beings to fall into reincarnation. Eye of reincarnation. It was one of the ancient visual techniques. Both parties were extremely close and there was no way to dodge the burst of the visual technique. The cultivators were moved. Nobody expected that at this point of the battle, Yi Tianqing would release a counterattack and release the Eye of Reincarnation, just as he was about to suffer a crushing defeat. Visual techniques were the hardest to cultivate. Up till this point of his cultivation, Su Zimo had only encountered 2 or 3 paragons with visual techniques. To think that Chaos Essence Sect would produce 2. It was only normal for cultivators with visual techniques to be invincible against those of the same cultivation realm. Visual techniques were released instantaneously and were almost fatal if they were caught off guard. Even if the opponent could react in time, they might not be able to defend against it. Even if they could defend against it, they would definitely exhaust their mental strength. If they seized the opportunity to attack, they would still be able to kill the other party. The expressions of Lung Ro and the others changed. They knew that Su Zimo knew an extremely terrifying visual technique as well. Previously, when Su Zimo fought against the Protoss, he released this visual technique and gained the upper hand. However, that visual technique was the Illumination Dragon's Eye. Once released, it would be equivalent to exposing the fact that he was a demonic cultivator. If Arakatsuki Michinoku intervened, not only would he not be able to kill Yi Tiancheng, Su Zimo might even die here. In a flash, a dense cluster of flying swords appeared in Su Zimo's right eye. They were small and exquisite, resembling embroidery needles. Those embroidery needles were none other than the 36 flying swords conjured by the Illumination Stone. In the blink of an eye, the 36 flying swords had already formed the Illumination Sword formation and shot out from Su Zimo's right eye. This level of strength, 100 years ago, there was a rumor that this man was invincible in melee combat. The rumor was true. All the cultivators widened their eyes in shock. How was this a cultivator? Even the strongest pure-blooded ferocious beasts were suppressed by his body. This man was even more ferocious than ferocious beasts. Perfected Lord Panglan's eyes were filled with fear as well. He realized that he must not get close to Su Zimo. Although Heavenly Dipper Sec specialized in body tempering as well and his physique was not weak either, he was no different from paper in the hands of Su Zimo. Even so, Perfected Lord Panglan had no intention of retreating. He sneered coldly with a cold glint in his eyes. No matter what, Yi Tiancheng was an early-stage nascent soul. Just now, his dermic powers were greatly depleted after the battle, and his essence spirit was weak. He made use of this opportunity to consume a large number of elixirs hurriedly. Yi Tiancheng had just caught his breath and was about to charge forward when he realized that his 9 ferocious flood dragons were already swept away by Su Zimo with ease. Yi Tiancheng's heart skipped a beat, and this was the first time his eyes revealed fear. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had encountered countless strong enemies and had never tasted defeat. Although he had experienced multiple life and death situations and his life was hanging by a thread, he had never felt fear in his heart. However, at that moment Yi Tiancheng was afraid. That cultivator with refined features resembled a ferocious beast that ate humans. That seemingly frail body seemed to contain a terrifying power that could shake the world and suppress all living beings. This person is invincible. That was the only thought left in Yi Tiancheng's mind. Although he was an early-stage nascent soul, Yi Tiancheng's essence spirit could leave his body and roam the world like the essence spirit of a void reversion with the help of chaos essence chi. At the same time, he sought help from Hunyuan sect, hoping that a void reversion of Hunyuan sect could take action and block Su Zimo so that he could resolve this crisis. Yi Tiancheng's plan was not bad. Unfortunately, he had still underestimated Su Zimo. Oh, his essence spirit can leave his body? Su Zimo raised his brow slightly and said indifferently, however, it's useless. It was already not easy for an early-stage nascent soul to be able to leave his body with his essence spirit. Back then, Su Zimo had only reached this stage by relying on Qinglian's creation. If Yi Tiancheng was at late-stage nascent soul and was comparable to Su Zimo's cultivation realm, he would have to go through a lot of trouble to kill the latter. However, there was no doubt that Su Zimo would crush him domineeringly in today's battle. The void reversion of Hunyuan sect leaped into the air hurriedly and conjured hand seals, preparing to release a dermic art to save Yi Tiancheng. However, a bolt of lightning flashed through his eyes. Swash! It was too fast. Before he could react, another person had appeared in front of him. Su Zimo. A pair of wings formed from dermic powers behind him dissipated slowly. With the burst of ethereal wings and lightning escape, Su Zimo arrived first and gripped Yi Tianqing's essence spirit in his palm. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. Chaos Essence Sex Void Reversion had yet to conjure his dermic art. Chaos Essence Sex Void Reversion was shocked and took 2 steps back. Even he was afraid of Su Zimo getting close to him. The other Chaos Essence Sect cultivators were even more flustered and retreated one after another. "You can't kill me." Yi Tianqing's voice sounded from Su Zimo's palm, sounding fierce on the outside but cowardly on the inside. Everyone looked over. In Su Zimo's palm was a gigantic ball of dermic power. Yi Tianqing's essence spirit was trapped within and could not move in fear. "Su Zimo, release him." Chaos Essence Sex Void Reversion reacted and shouted. Yi Tianqing's essence spirit was in Su Zimo's palm and could be crushed with a single thought. He did not dare to act rashly out of fear of breaking the vases. Arakatsuki Michinoku took a deep breath and stood up slowly, saying in a deep voice, "Su Zimo, since the outcome is decided, let him go." "Fu." A hint of mockery flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Turning around, he looked at the high and mighty Arakatsuki Michinoku and asked instead, "If I were in Yi Tianqing's shoes, would Patriarch Lanyue plead for mercy on my behalf?" Arakatsuki Michinoku's expression darkened. The battle between Yi Tianqing and Su Zimo was clearly a personal feud, and had nothing to do with her Chiguramon. However, if she could save Yi Tianqing's life, it could be considered as doing Chaos Essence Sect a favor. In Arakatsuki Michinoku's heart, if it was as Su Zimo said, she would definitely not plead for mercy on behalf of Su Zimo, and offend a super sect such as Chaos Essence Sect. Arakatsuki Michinoku suppressed the anger in her heart and said sternly, "Junior, I've been through this before. Let me give you a piece of advice. If you're too sharp and have no reservations, you'll definitely be killed in the future." "Killed in the future?" Su Zimo smiled indifferently. "I already have a lot of troubles to begin with. I don't care if there's one more. Su Zimo, we don't have a deep feud. It's just the title of number 1 perfected lord. I'll give it to you. There's no need for you to kill me." Yi Tianqing was scared out of his wits and begged for mercy with a trembling voice filled with endless fear. The crowd sighed. It was truly a pity that the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking and the number 1 perfected lord of the Middle Continent had fallen to such a state. Not many people could remain calm in the face of death. Yi Tianqing, if it was just a fight for the title of number 1 perfected lord, I wouldn't even bother to make a move. Su Zimo's gaze shifted as he glared at the essence spirit in his palm and said coldly, "However, you shouldn't have targeted Lung Ro." Yi Tianqing's heart turned cold when he heard that. Su Zimo had already raised his head and looked at everyone from Chaos Essence Sect coldly. "Since Dean wants to lure me out, I'll give him a huge gift today." "Die." Su Zimo gripped his palm tightly. Yi Tianqing's essence spirit was crushed and destroyed on the spot. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.